Chapter 2024. Morong Yu. Ancestor Void Sky instantly reacted and roared. At the same time, an incomparably violent aura burst out from his body and swept in all directions, wanting to kill Morong Yu. Under Void Sky's terrifying power, the surrounding solar fire was directly extinguished. In an instant, the area within 1,000 miles suddenly became a vacuum zone without any solar fire. However, there weren't any traces of Morong Yu in the vicinity, let alone being killed. Presumably, Morong Yu had already left this place. However, Ancestor Void Sky was still furious. Stormy waves of power constantly burst out from his body, preventing the surrounding solar fire from approaching. However, he was only a divine sense or a power incarnation in the end. After losing Li Jiang as a carrier, he quickly faded and disappeared soon after. After Void Sky's figure disappeared, the solar fire in the vicinity quickly spread over and submerged the place that had previously become a vacuum zone. At this moment, Morong Yu's figure slowly appeared not far away. Just as he said, if he wanted to kill someone, even the Heavenly Emperor couldn't protect them. Not to mention Void Sky. It turned out that although Morong Yu had been forced to retreat, he didn't actually retreat. Instead, he was lurking nearby. In the end, when Void Sky and Li Jiang weren't paying attention, he suddenly killed Li Jiang with a sudden attack. Originally, it wouldn't have been so easy for Morong Yu to kill Li Jiang. After all, although Void Sky was only a power incarnation, his strength was far stronger than a half-step Insight Realm cultivator. If he was on guard, Morong Yu's attack wouldn't have been able to kill Li Jiang. However, Void Sky was too careless. He thought that as long as he was there, Morong Yu wouldn't be able to stir up any trouble. Therefore, in the end, he failed miserably. Morong Yu killed Li Jiang in front of him. This was a slap in the face. Extremely far away from Morong Yu, under the Sun Cave, Ancestor Void Heaven, who was walking with Lin Jiashu and Lin Jiafeng, suddenly stopped. Then, Lin Jiashu and Li Wuyo saw Ancestor Void Sky gnashing his teeth, his eyes flashing with terrifying killing intent. Lin Jiafeng and Li Wuyo naturally didn't think that Ancestor Void Heaven was targeting them. If he was really targeting the two of them, Su Tian didn't have the guts to do so. Either one of them could easily kill Su Tian. In that case, something must have happened to the Solar Sect. The two of them naturally weren't interested in Void Heaven Ancestor's private matters. Just as they were about to leave, Ancestor Su Tian's words made them stop. Morong Yu has appeared above us. Lin Jiafeng and Lin Jiashu turned to look at Su Tian with narrowed eyes. Ancestor Void Sky continued, I can guarantee that it was Morong Yu because my avatar saw him with its own eyes. Since your doppelganger has already seen him, did you manage to capture him? Lin Jiashu asked indifferently. Su Tian's old face turned red. That little bastard is too cunning and has many tricks up his sleeve. I was careless and let him escape. Lin Jiafeng sneered. Is that your excuse? Trash. Ancestor Void Sky's face turned red. He indeed hadn't been able to capture Morong Yu. However, that didn't mean that he was trash, but rather that Morong Yu was too cunning. However, he didn't refute. He couldn't afford to offend the two great gods in front of him. At best, he would die, but at worst, the entire solar sect would be destroyed. Of course, even if the entire solar sect was destroyed, Su Tian didn't care. The key was that he didn't want to be destroyed. Immediately, Su Tian brought Lin Jiafeng and Li Wuyo to charge forward, wanting to capture Morong Yu. At this moment, Lin Jiafeng and Li Wuyo's suspicions about Morong Yu grew. Although Su Tian was a bit trash, he was still a profound underworld realm expert. Even with this level of strength, he still couldn't capture Morong Yu? Did that mean that Morong Yu also had the ability to kill Lin Zhe? No matter what, as long as they captured Morong Yu, the truth would be revealed. Thus, they used their fastest speed to charge forward. However, when they arrived at the place where Li Jiang was killed, they didn't even see a shadow, let alone Morong Yu. The three of them immediately started searching the vicinity. However, after half a day, they could only give up. There was no trace of Morong Yu at all. Lin Jiafeng looked at Su Tian with a dangerous gaze. Su Tian, are you playing with us? When he met Lin Jiafeng's gaze, Su Tian's heart couldn't help but tremble. However, he still forced himself to remain calm. Why would I play with you? My disciple was killed by Murong Yu here. Interesting. I even suspect that Lin Zhe was killed by Murong Yu. A Bright World Realm expert has the ability to hide from us. If he isn't strong and has a powerful concealment technique, then he must have a powerful treasure. Lin Jiashu nodded. Then, the three of them continued to dive down. Then, where was Murong Yu at this moment? Murong Yu had already gone down. After killing Li Jiang, he changed sides and quickly went down. As mentioned before, the sun cavern got bigger the further one went down. Thus, when Murong Yu took a detour, he didn't bump into Su Tian and the other two. Moreover, because he had already gone down once, Murong Yu determined the direction and arrived in front of the sun crystal mine without any obstruction. At this moment, Murong Yu's strength had increased by at least 100 times compared to the first time he came here. Thus, although the sun fire was still terrifying, Murong Yu didn't need to use much force to enter the sun crystal mine. At the entrance of the sun crystal mine, dazzling rays of light could be seen scattered on the ground. Those were pieces of sun crystals that were in a mess. It should have been caused by the battle between the sun crystal beast and the incarnation bead. However, the sun crystal mine didn't collapse because of that battle. This made Murong Yu sigh at the terrifying strength of the sun crystal mine. Shua! Murong Yu summoned the Hichu Luo Shu and directly entered the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, under his control, the Hichu Luo Shu slowly flew towards the sun crystal mine. During this process, Murong Yu had already made preparations to teleport. Once he found something wrong, he would teleport without hesitation. Of course, he didn't forget to leave a large number of teleportation jade slips here. If there was a direct way to get here, Murong Yu definitely wasn't willing to go down from the top of the sun cavern. It was a waste of time. Although Murong Yu's speed was slow, he still entered the sun crystal mine without any hindrance. In the sun crystal mine, the sun crystals were scattered in all directions and piled up in a large pile on the ground. Presumably, the aftermath of the battle had shaken off the sun crystals embedded in the walls. Murong Yu hid the Hichu Luo Shu and didn't immediately appear. Instead, he hid in a corner and observed. The sun crystal beast didn't appear here. However, it wasn't killed. This was because Murong Yu clearly felt an extremely terrifying aura faintly coming from the depths of the sun crystal mine. This made Murong Yu feel that it was a pity. If the sun crystal beast had been killed, then the sun crystal mine would be his. As long as the sun crystal beast existed, Murong Yu would have to sneak around every time he came. Whoosh! Murong Yu moved the Hichu Luo Shu to the exit of the sun crystal mine. Then, he opened the Hichu Luo Shu and stretched out a large hand from the Hichu Luo Shu, grabbing the sun crystals that were piled up like a small mountain on the ground. With a grab, thousands of sun crystals were caught in the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, Murong Yu moved the Hichu Luo Shu to another position and continued to hide. After an hour, he discovered that the sun crystal beast didn't make any movements. Therefore, he stretched out his large hand again. At the same time, he stretched out two large hands and grabbed more than 2,000 sun crystals into the Hichu Luo Shu. At this time, he had already grabbed more than 3,000 sun crystals. According to his previous estimation, these 3,000 sun crystals were enough for him to break through to the 9th level of the Bright World Realm. Even if the sun crystal beast rushed out at this time, Murong Yu wouldn't have any regrets and would leave this place. However, there was a good saying, a man whose heart is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Murong Yu was like this now. 3,000 sun crystals were still too little. Murong Yu was still unwilling to leave, so he made another move. More than 2,000 sun crystals were caught by him. Roar! At this time, a loud muffled sound came from the depths of the sun crystal mine, shaking the sun crystals embedded in the walls and causing them to fall down. Even Murong Yu, who was inside the Hichu Luo Shu, was shaken to the point that the qi and blood in his body were surging. so much so that he staggered and almost fell to the ground. One could imagine how terrifying the Sun Crystal Beast's strength was. In the Hichu Luo Shu, Murong Yu's expression was somewhat gloomy. The roar, just now, made him feel a hint of warning. Why did the Sun Crystal Beast only warn him and not attack directly? It was very simple. It must have been seriously injured, or it couldn't attack for some reason. So it warned Murong Yu and wanted to scare him away. If I were to leave just like this, wouldn't I be letting you down? Murong Yu smiled as he reached out with both hands to grab the mountain of sun crystals on the ground. Roar! When the Sun Crystal Beast saw that not only was Murong Yu not going, but he was also grabbing even more sun crystals, it let out another furious roar. Its voice contained monstrous anger. Little guy, these sun crystals aren't your personal belongings, and there are so many of them that you can't use them all. Why don't you share some with me? Murong Yu said with a smile. At the same time, his hands continued to grab the sun crystals. Little guy, would the Sun Crystal Beast's face turn green after hearing Murong Yu's name? In any case, an incomparably furious aura could be heard. Chapter 2025. Roar. Another angry roar sounded. Murong Yu was already used to it. He stared at the angry roar and was about to reach out his hand to grab the sun crystals again. But at that moment, an extremely strong aura of death suddenly enveloped his heart. Murong Yu immediately felt that something was wrong. With a thought, the Hichu Luo Shu directly teleported away. Boom! After Murong Yu disappeared, a huge claw that was as smooth as a sun crystal fiercely slapped out from the depths of the sun crystal mine. It slapped the spot where Murong Yu had been, causing countless sun crystals to splatter in all directions. What a sinister fellow! Murong Yu, who had already appeared in the sun, couldn't help but secretly wipe away a drop of cold sweat on his forehead. If he hadn't reacted quickly and decisively, he would have been killed by the Sun Crystal Beast's claw. Murong Yu didn't think that if he hadn't angered the Sun Crystal Beast, it wouldn't have attacked him when it wasn't convenient to do so. Nearly 100,000 sun crystals should be enough for a while, right? After counting the sun crystals in Hichu Luo Shu, a smile appeared on Murong Yu's face. 100,000 sun crystals is only the tip of the iceberg of the sun crystal mine. Then the sun crystal mine has at least 100 million sun crystals, or even more. Murong Yu's eyes instantly lit up. At that moment, he couldn't wait to immediately suppress the sun crystal beast and then dig out the entire sun crystal mine. I wonder if the two experts from the Lin clan will go deep into the sun crystal mine. If the Lin clan finds out, then the sun crystal mine will have nothing to do with me. Murong Yu suddenly felt a headache coming on. However, so what if they found out? He couldn't stop them. If he wanted to stop them, then he had to at least enter the manifestation realm. I'll go back and break through to the 9th stage of the Bright World realm first. Then use the power of the Star Core to comprehend the manifestation realm in one go. Murong Yu thought to himself. Just as he was about to go into seclusion to cultivate, he suddenly received a message. Then, he too and Luo Shu teleported. When they reappeared, they were already in the Dongfang family. My lord, Murong Yu had just come out of the Hichu Luo Shu when a joyful voice sounded in his ears. In front of him stood a powerhouse who emitted a powerful and terrifying aura, but was still somewhat unstable. Dongfang Lang. The reason why Dongfang Lang's aura was somewhat unstable was because he had successfully broken through to the Netherworld Insight realm. He became one of the most powerful people in the solar system. Moreover, Dongfang Lang's cultivation method and inheritance were from the rising Sundao Mansion. Therefore, even though he had just broken through, his strength was absolutely not inferior to Ancestor Void Heavens. Dongfang Lang was more than enough to dominate the Sun Sect, but the Sun Sect had sent a few insightful Netherworld experts from the Lin clan. Although Dongfang Lang was powerful, the gap between him and the other party was still a bit big. Yes, they have broken through. Dongfang Yuan and the others have also reached the half-step insightful Netherworld realm. In time, they will all become insightful Netherworld realm powerhouses. Murong Yu sensed for a moment, then nodded and said with a smile, They didn't know what kind of terrifying existence the rising sundown master was, but the cultivation method and inheritance he left behind were too terrifying. In a short period of time, the strength of the Dongfang family had increased by a lot. If it was in the past, Dongfang Lang and the others wouldn't even dare to think about such strength. Therefore, they were quite grateful to Murongyu. If it weren't for Murongyu, how could they have such strength now? They probably wouldn't be able to break through to their current realm, even if they worked hard for a lifetime, right? After following Murongyu, this was just the beginning. Who knew what they would achieve in the future? But they all knew that their future achievements would definitely not be low. At least they could break out of the solar system. Murongyu gave them a few more words of encouragement, then entered Hichu Luoshu to cultivate in seclusion. Originally, Dongfang Lang and the others suggested that Murongyu do something, but Murongyu rejected it. They were still too weak. Even without the intervention of the Lin clan, the other patriarch of the solar system was stronger than Dongfang Lang. They still couldn't dominate the solar system. Therefore, they needed to continue to hide their strength and bide their time. In Hichu Luoshu, Murongyu began to refine a large number of sun crystals without hesitation. Finally, when he refined close to 4,000 sun crystals, he made a breakthrough in his cultivation and directly charged into the 9th level of the Bright World realm. Then, after refining 10,000 to 20,000 sun crystals, not only did he consolidate his realm, but he also raised it to the creation realm level 9. However, just as he was about to refine the star core and break through to the creation realm, he encountered a tragedy. Although Murongyu hadn't started to absorb the power of the star core, he suddenly had a mysterious feeling in his heart. Even if he refined the star core, he wouldn't be able to break through to the creation realm. In fact, the terrifying power and various comprehensions contained in the star core might even cause his physical body and soul to explode. Why did this happen? Murongyu didn't know, but he believed in his own intuition. Therefore, he felt that this should be due to the restriction of his soul and physical body. His soul and physical body were only at the early stage of the Bright World realm, and the gap between them and the peak was too big. And he had a triple cultivator body. If he wanted to break through, at least the other 2 cultivators couldn't be too much of a hindrance. On the contrary, it was easy to improve his physical body. Because Murongyu still had the Chaos Origin liquid, he could go deeper into the Sun Cavern. He could also enter the space inside the puppet and use gravity to temper his physical body and then achieve the goal of improving his physical body. However, if he didn't have a large amount of soul power to devour, it would be difficult to break through by relying on his own cultivation. In fact, that was the time it took for a normal cultivator or even a normal genius to break through. Murongyu often broke through a small realm in a few years, months, or even days. At such a speed, he would be punished by the heavens. Not only is my appetite strange, but the requirements for a triple cultivator breakthrough are also too high. Murongyu sighed helplessly. If he had only cultivated one or both of them, his current strength would have already surpassed the Insight realm and reached a higher realm, right? However, Murongyu didn't regret it. If he hadn't cultivated 3 of them, how could his strength be so abnormal now? Not to mention having the battle prowess to cross an entire realm. Even crossing a small realm would be difficult. The more terrifying one's combat strength was at the same realm, the harder it was to break through. If the heavens opened a door for you, they would definitely close a window for you. Because he felt that he couldn't break through, Murongyu couldn't be bothered to try. It wouldn't be good to waste the power of the star core. Therefore, he left Hichu Luoshu and returned to the Dongfang family. Do your best to find anything related to the soul. This was the order Murongyu gave to Dongfang Lang after he came out. Dongfang Lang passed down the order without any hesitation. Therefore, the entire Dongfang family began to search for anything related to the soul within their sphere of influence, including the Sun sect and the Lunar sect. However, this kind of thing was rare to begin with, so Murongyu didn't have much hope. However, it was better to have someone searching than to do nothing. At this time, Lin Jiashu and Lin Jiafeng had already left the Sun Cave. This was because they couldn't go deeper. They had already searched the places they could reach several times. There was no trace of Muronyu or Elder Duanhan at all. Muronyu could go deeper? Not to mention Su Tian, Lin Jiashu, and Lin Jiashu didn't believe it at all. Then, where did Muronyu go? He must have escaped from his sun cave. Therefore, a wanted poster was once again spread throughout the entire solar system. Muronyu became a wanted criminal again. This made Muronyu quite speechless. And this time, the wanted poster was unprecedentedly strong. As long as Muronyu was captured, he could become the true disciple of ancestor Su Tian. Even if Murongyu's traces were found and confirmed, there would be a huge reward, and he could also become a disciple of the Sun Sect. At the same time, the Sun Sect had already begun to investigate Murongyu's background with all their strength. This made Muronyu feel a trace of crisis. Even without the help of the Lin family, the solar system would probably trace Muronyu to the Holy World. And with the help of the Lin family, the time to trace Murongyu's background would be infinitely shortened. But now, Muronyu couldn't stop it at all. Take Murong Xian and the others away? They couldn't leave the Holy World without passing through reincarnation. Move the entire Holy World away? This was a good idea, but where would they move to? The Insight Realm could create a small world that belonged to him, and the Holy World was also a small world. In theory, Dongfang Lang could operate the small world as his own. But now the Holy World belonged to Muronyu, and even if Muronyu could remove his control of the Holy World, but he wasn't willing to give the Holy World to Dongfang Lang. Who knew when Dongfang Lang would fall? After all, the Insight Realm powerhouse wasn't immortal. And once Dongfang Lang fell, who knew where the Holy World would go? Would it collapse? The solar system is just a small remote galaxy after all, and it is extremely lacking in all kinds of things. If we can go to the Milky Way star field, then maybe we can get some soul protection. Elder Duanhan said after thinking for a while. At this time, his power sealed by ancestor Su Tian had been unlocked by Dongfang Lang, and because of the sun crystal, his strength had improved further. Moreover, Dongfang Lang also shared the cultivation methods and inheritances he obtained from the Rising Sun Dao Mansion with Elder Duanhan. With these, it was only a matter of time before Elder Duanhan broke through to the Insight Realm. Leave the solar system? Muronyu pondered for a while and decided to leave. After all, he couldn't improve his strength quickly in the solar system. He had to leave the solar system, and he had the Hichu Luo Shu, so he could come back at any time. Otherwise, he could only watch as the Lin family destroyed the Saint World. Chapter 2026. If the solar system was compared to a small mountain village, then the entire Milky Way star field was a country. In this country, there were many small mountain villages like the solar system. There were also many towns, small cities, and even big cities that were much bigger than small mountain villages. And these bigger than the solar system could only be considered galaxies. As long as it was within the Milky Way star field, it was a galaxy. In the Milky Way star field, there were countless galaxies. The vastness of the starry sky was unimaginable to those who had never explored it. It was like coming to the solar system from the cultivation world. Before coming here, who knew that the solar system was so terrifying? The solar system was one of the most remote galaxies in the Milky Way star field. It was very barren, and there were almost no netherworld powerhouses. According to what Elder Duanhan said, in some large galaxies outside the solar system, there were a lot of netherworld powerhouses in those places. Forces without netherworld powerhouses were simply mediocre forces. As for the entire Milky Way star field, there were even super existences that surpassed the netherworld realm. They actually decided to leave the solar system. But how? But there was another problem. Because Elder Duanhan didn't know how to leave the solar system and reach the nearest galaxy. Master, didn't you come from another galaxy? Why don't you know how to go back? He looked at Elder Duanhan helplessly. Elder Duanhan smiled. Although he came from another galaxy, he entered the solar system by accident. How could there be only one way? Fly directly? It wasn't impossible. The distance between the solar system and another galaxy shouldn't be too far. With their current speed, They could probably reach another galaxy in a few hundred years. But a few hundred years? By then, the holy world would be uprooted by the Lin family. What was the use? Coming back for revenge? The reason why Murong you wanted to leave the solar system was to stop all of this. And the reason why Elder Duan Hun entered the Sun sect was to get away to leave the solar system. But he didn't ask for it for many years. Maybe the Sun sect didn't have a way to leave the solar system. Then there were only two possibilities now. Since the Lin family could come to the solar system, they naturally knew how to go back. However, why would the Lin family tell Murong you about this? Subdue the Lin family? If Murong you had that strength, would he need to leave the solar system to find a way to break through? Therefore, it was impossible for the Lin family to help. Now, there was only one way left. One day later, Murong you arrived at the Milky Way auction house on the pure sun star. What? You want to leave the solar system? Hearing Murong yu's request, Zhu Xiaoning looked at Murong yu suspiciously. This made Murong yu very unhappy. The Milky Way auction house is a big auction house from another galaxy. I think there should be a passage or a teleportation array to leave the solar system, right? We didn't ask you to give us the channel for nothing. I will buy this information, Murong yu said with some displeasure. Zhu Xiaoning frowned as she looked at Murong yu, not replying. The reason why she was so surprised was because the Milky Way auction house was about to leave the solar system. And this time, they were escorting a supreme treasure. That was top secret. But at this moment, Murong yu came over and requested to leave the solar system. Was this a coincidence or on purpose? That was why Zhu Xiaoning was so surprised. She had to be careful because this matter concerned their future in life. She couldn't be careless. Why do you want to leave the solar system? Zhu Xiaoning looked into Murong yu's eyes and asked. Murong yu looked unhappy. I've been in the solar system for a long time and want to explore the outside world. Miss Zhu, is there such a passage? If there isn't, I will think of another way. Murong yu was indeed very unhappy, because Zhu Xiaoning looked at him with a scrutinizing gaze. Did she think that he would harm the auction house? Although the Milky Way auction house was powerful, it was still a question whether this branch in the solar system had as much wealth as them. Zhu Xiaoning didn't say anything. She just looked at Murong yu quietly. In the end, Murong yu lost his patience and stood up to leave. Wasn't it just a passage? He didn't believe that he couldn't leave the solar system. Wait, our auction house will be leaving the solar system soon. Come with us. Zhu Xiaoning said just as Murong yu was about to leave. Okay, here's my deposit. Murong yu didn't even turn his head as he tossed a spatial treasure over. There were 100,000 high-grade crystals inside. To him, origin crystals could still be earned back, but if the person was gone, then it was gone. He didn't want anything to happen to Murong Xian and the others. He also didn't want anything to happen to Shenzhen's people. However, because the holy world was a small world, one had to break through reincarnation in order to come to the endless universe. Murong yu couldn't help with this. Otherwise, he would have already sent Shenzhen's people out of the holy world. Seeing Murong yu's figure disappear from her sight, Zhu Xiaoning shook her head helplessly. She knew that after this incident, there was a gap between her and Murong yu. However, she had to do this for the Milky Way auction house. Miss, are you really letting Murong yu travel with us? After Murong yu left, the fat manager walked out and looked at Zhu Xiaoning doubtfully. Murong yu should be trustworthy. Whether or not he was trustworthy, Zhu Xiaoning wasn't so sure. The fat manager didn't say anything. After all, Zhu Xiaoning was the real decision-maker. Once she made the decision, she would be responsible for anything that happened. As for the fatty, he only needed to do his part. After leaving the auction house, Murong yu found an inn in the city to stay. As for Zhao Jiqing and the others, Murong yu had already informed them before, so there was no need to say goodbye to them. However, the large black dog and Rong Zhuo followed him. The large black dog was one thing, but it refused to stay in the purple sun paradise no matter what. In the end, Murong yu had no choice but to throw it into the He-Tu and Luo Shu. As for Rong Zhuo, she was similar to the large black dog. Moreover, he remembered that he was the one who bought Rong Zhuo, and that he could study her soul on the way, so he brought her along. 3 days later, Zhu Xiaoning sent someone to find him, saying that they could set off. Thus, Morongyu rushed to the Milky Way auction house. When he arrived at the auction house, he was shocked. There were already over 100 people in the auction house waiting to set off. The weakest of them was at the half-step Netherworld Insight Realm, and most of them were at the Netherworld Insight Realm. When they saw Morongyu, their gazes all gathered on him. However, they quickly retracted their gazes. Although they weren't hostile towards Morongyu and didn't look down on Morongyu, Morongyu still felt immense pressure. He also finally understood why Zhu Xiaoning looked at him like that. The Milky Way auction house was clearly carrying out a top-secret operation. Thus, he let go of his worries. However, what made him speechless was that he only wanted to know the passage out of the solar system, and he didn't say that he would go with the people from the auction house. Why did Zhu Xiaoning make such an arrangement? Such a huge lineup. Morongyu didn't know why, but he suddenly had an ominous feeling in his heart. If this feeling appeared, it meant that they might encounter danger on the way. However, even if the sky fell, there were tall people to hold it up. The Milky Way auction house had so many Netherworld Insight Realm experts. With them at the front, it should be very safe, right? Let's go, Zhu Xiaoning shouted, and then everyone quickly entered a teleportation array in the Milky Way auction house, quickly disappearing from the pure sun planet. Zhu Xiaoning, you're making such a big fuss, aren't you? Could it be that you don't know the other passageways? I'd better go from other places. Morongyu still had a bad feeling in his heart. Thus, although he knew that asking this would make Zhu Xiaoning unhappy, he still asked. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to leave the solar system, he really wanted to turn around and leave. Sure enough, Zhu Xiaoning glared at him fiercely. Morongyu smiled embarrassedly. Don't mind me. I just feel a little scared. Some unpleasant things might happen on the way. There's only one passage. Are you going or not? Zhu Xiaoning rolled her eyes. Of course, why not? Morongyu smiled embarrassedly and immediately followed behind Zhu Xiaoning, quickly entering the teleportation array. The teleportation array got longer and shorter, and they were teleported one by one. Not long after, they had entered the edge of the solar system, a remote and uninhabited area. In the endless starry sky, there are quite a few ancient teleportation arrays. The one we're taking now is one of them. It was discovered by the Almighty of the Milky Way auction house. After opening it, we came to manage the solar system. Zhu Xiaoning explained to Morongyu along the way. Morongyu nodded. In fact, many people can directly travel through the endless starry sky. The stronger they are, the faster they can travel. However, traveling through the endless starry sky will sometimes lead to great danger. Therefore, most people still choose to take the teleportation array. Morongyu nodded. If that was not the case, why would he come to the Milky Way auction house? However, this was only the first time. In the future, he would not need to take these teleportation arrays. With the Hichu Luoshu, he could directly teleport back to the solar system or the past. Morongyu, what did you leave behind? Morongyu had already developed a habit. Wherever he went, he would leave behind some teleportation jade slips. Therefore, the number of teleportation jade slips he could sense now was innumerable. However, no matter how secretive he was still discovered by Zhu Xiaoning in the end. Morongyu smiled faintly. It's nothing. I like to leave things everywhere. I can't help it. Rich people can do whatever they want. As they spoke, they had already stepped out of the teleportation array. Morongyu threw out a bunch of teleportation jade slips. Boom! However, before Morongyu threw out the jade slips, a claw the size of a planet slammed down from the starry sky. Desolation. When Morongyu saw the beast that attacked them, he could not help but exclaim. It was actually desolation. Moreover, desolation was in existence at the Insight Realm. The aura it emitted caused the planet Morongyu was on to tremble violently. Chapter 2027. The ancient teleportation array used by the Milky Way auction house was not a single teleportation array that directly teleported people from the solar system to other galaxies. Instead, it was a combination of many teleportation arrays. Therefore, Murong Yu and the others constantly left from this teleportation array and quickly enter the next one. The distance between these teleportation arrays might be only a few steps, or they might be separated by a planet. Therefore, Murong Yu and the others kept appearing on the planets in the endless starry sky. Now, as soon as they appeared in the teleportation array, they were attacked by desolates. Insight realm desolates. If it was only one desolate, it would not make the ancient planet where Murong Yu was on tremble. The reason why the planet trembled was because there were dozens of terrifying desolates in the sky above the planet. One must know that the size of a desolate was very large. Dozens of desolates occupied the sky above the planet, and they were much larger than the entire planet. They covered the sky as if it had entered the night. When Murong Yu and the others rushed out of the teleportation array, these desolates launched an attack. The power was like a stormy sea that shattered the void, and it carried a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth as it slammed down. At this moment, Murong Yu's heart was shrouded by the terrifying aura of death. However, fortunately, the experts of the Milky Way auction house were not to be trifled with. They reacted immediately. After a roar, most of the Insight Realm experts attacked. A small number of experts protected Zhu Xiaoning. Of course, Murong Yu, Zhu Xiaoning's friend, was also taken care of. Boom! In an instant, the attacks of both sides collided, and an earth-shattering sound was heard. Pooh! 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 In the sky, the powerful and terrifying desolates could not withstand the impact of the terrifying power and exploded into clouds of blood mist, scattering between heaven and earth. In an instant, the entire planet seemed to be raining blood, and it was very tragic. Moreover, this was not an ordinary blood rain, but the blood of Insight Realm experts. Wherever it passed, layers of ripples appeared in the void. The boulders, mountains, and trees on the ground shattered after being stained by the blood. The blood contained an enormous amount of power, which was not something that ordinary stones could withstand. Even Rebirth Realm and Chaos Realm experts couldn't withstand a drop of blood from a profound Nether Realm expert. After a round of attacks from the dozens of terrifying desolates, about a third of them died. However, the situation at the Milky Way auction house wasn't any better. Several half-step Nether Insight cultivators were also blasted into a bloody mist. They couldn't be any more dead. It couldn't be helped. Most of them were only focused on protecting Zhu Xiaoning. Those half-step Nether Passage cultivators weren't worthy of their full protection. The only reason Murong Yu was fine was because of Zhu Xiaoning. Kill them all, Zhu Xiaoning ordered coldly. His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when those Nether Insight Realm experts had already soared into the sky and charged towards those desolates. Although they were all Netherworld experts, Zhu Xiaoning was the one leading the group. They had to listen to her orders. Murong Yu's expression was also somewhat unsightly. Why would these desolates gather here? And why would they attack them without any reason? This was clearly done on purpose. Perhaps this was someone's scheme. To be able to incite these desolates to attack, the other party's strength was definitely not weak. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Zhu Xiaoning had obviously thought of this. Therefore, she gave the order to kill these desolates first. Then, she could focus on dealing with those powerful enemies hiding in the dark. However, what made Murong Yu feel strange was that they left very secretly. Moreover, the ancient teleportation array used by the Milky Way auction house should be very secretive. How did the other party know about all this and even set up an ambush here? There were dozens of desolates, and all of them were supreme existences at the profound Nether Realm. However, the Milky Way auction house's experts weren't weak either. They were even stronger than them. Therefore, when the Milky Way auction house's experts charged forward, they directly launched a massacre. The desolates continued to fall. They weren't a match at all. This was because the Milky Way auction house's experts were attacking one desolate in groups of 2 or 3. Originally, in a one-on-one situation, they could at least fight to a draw. 3 against 1. How could the desolates be a match? However, the desolates were indeed extremely terrifying beasts. The more their companions died, the more ferocious they became. In the end, the Milky Way auction house's experts killed all the desolates. However, many of them were injured, and a few were even seriously injured. The desolates were all killed. Many of the experts also walked back. However, no one was happy. On the contrary, their faces were solemn, because until now, they hadn't seen the other party appear, and they didn't find any traces of other people. Could this be just a coincidence? The fat manager said hesitantly. Hearing this, the others nodded. They also had the same idea. However, was this really just a coincidence? Moron, didn't think so. However, his status was here, so he didn't voice his concerns. Instead, he looked at Zhu Xiaoning. At this time, Zhu Xiaoning frowned slightly. Although her face was gloomy, it still couldn't hide her beauty. And because she was thinking she had a different kind of beauty. Let's find the next teleportation array first. Soon, Zhu Xiaoning gave the order. Thus, everyone rose into the air and flew toward a planet not far away. The distance between the two planets wasn't very close. However, Moron and the others were extremely fast. Therefore, it didn't take long for them to set foot on another planet. The moment they stepped on solid ground, Moron suddenly felt an extremely strong sense of danger. Immediately, without any hesitation, he retreated backward. Moreover, in the process, he grabbed Zhu Xiaoning with one hand. Before Zhu Xiaoning could react, she only saw the scenery in front of her change, and then she disappeared from the planet. The moment Zhu Xiaoning disappeared, boom, a loud noise suddenly came from the planet under their feet. Following that, the entire planet exploded with a bang, instantly turning into a pile of fine powder. This was the explosion of a planet. An incomparably terrifying impact force rushed out and swept out in all directions. Everywhere it passed, the void was directly torn apart or even annihilated. Boom, boom, boom. The powerhouses of the Milky Way auction house didn't react slowly either. They quickly retreated after Moron. During this process, all of them opened up their power shields to protect themselves. However, the explosion of the planet was too sudden. It caught them off guard. Some of the powerhouses didn't even have time to retreat before they were ruthlessly bombarded by the impact. Those half-step Insight Realm powerhouses were immediately blasted into a bloody mist, and even their souls were killed before they could escape. Even a few of the Nether Insight experts were sent flying by the impact. The Insight Realm powerhouses who were seriously injured in the battle with Desolation were also killed. Moron reaction was the fastest among everyone. He retreated in time, grabbed Zhu Xiaoning, and rushed into the Hichu Luoshu. However, to be able to be this fast was already very fast. Therefore, just as they entered the He2 and the Book of the Luo, before they could activate the teleportation function of the He2 and the Book of the Luo, the terrifying impact formed by the explosion of the planet slammed into the He2 and the Book of the Luo. Hichu, burn the high-grade origin crystal. If it doesn't work, immediately burn the sun crystal. Moron shouted in his mind. Therefore, Hichu directly burned the high-grade origin crystal. Moron also directly ignored Zhu Xiaoning and began to circulate the Hichu Luoshu with all his strength to resist the impact. Moron had no choice but to do this. The terrifying power of the planet's explosion could directly kill an Insight Realm powerhouse. If he didn't go all out, he might die. Rumble, the terrible impact was like a storm and also like a raging wave, crazily hitting the He2 and the inscription of Luo. Even though the He2 and the inscription of Luo had been reduced to the smallest of particles, the impact was still terrible. Pooh! Immediately, Moron spat out a mouthful of blood due to the terrifying overflow damage. His mind was immediately severely injured, and this was only the beginning. Sun Crystal, the tree of life in Moron's Dantian, began to tremble violently. Waves of ocean-like life force rapidly surged out and frantically washed through his body, repairing his injured body and even his mind. At the same time, Yu burned the sun crystal and raised his strength to the limit. Boom. A terrifying aura surpassing the half-step netherworld realm erupted from Yu's body and sent Zhu Xiaoning, who was still unaware of what had happened, flying. Yu ignored the shocked Zhu Xiaoning and desperately channeled energy into the Hichu Luo Shu to resist the impact of the planet's explosion. Fortunately, the Hichu Luo Shu had been reduced to an extremely small particle, so the damage it suffered was not even the tip of the iceberg. Thus, with the combined efforts of Yu and Hichu, he was finally able to resist the impact of the planet's explosion. However, during this process, he had already spat out several dozen mouthfuls of blood, and his mind had also withered. If it weren't for the Tree of Life, he would have been killed by the overflow damage. In addition, a third of the high-grade origin crystals Yu had obtained from the Chaos Origin Liquid Auction had been used up, which was more than 10 million pieces. This was a huge loss. In contrast, Zhu Xiaoning, who was inside the Hichu Luo Shu, was unharmed. Chapter 2028. When he could no longer feel the attacks, Yu sat down cross-legged. At this moment, his physical body, which had reached the bright world boundary realm, had already started to crack. His mind was also severely injured. Therefore, he immediately sat down. Yu. Zhu Xiaoning was about to ask if Yu was all right when a force blasted her out of the Hichu Luo Shu. Young miss, it's great that you're all right. After Zhu Xiaoning appeared, the fat manager ran over. Just now, when the planet exploded, they all saw that Zhu Xiaoning had been taken away by Yu. At that time, there were already profound underworld realm experts who wanted to stop them, but it was too late. However, there were also some profound underworld realm experts who worked together to protect the space where the Hichu Luo Shu was. Because of this, the Hichu Luo Shu didn't suffer too much damage. Even so, Yu was severely injured. If not for the help of those profound underworld realm experts, Yu definitely wouldn't have been able to hold on. One could imagine how terrifying the explosion of a planet was. Even profound underworld realm experts couldn't withstand it. Of course, this was also because these profound underworld realm experts weren't high-level profound underworld realm experts. Otherwise, even the explosion of a primordial star wouldn't have been able to harm them. How are the casualties? After Zhu Xiaoning appeared, she floated in space with a gloomy expression. Other than me, all the half-step profound underworld realm experts are dead. 3 profound underworld realm experts are dead as well. The fat man's expression also darkened. They still didn't know what was going on, but so many of them had already died. If someone really wanted to deal with them, they would be too aggrieved, because they didn't even see the other party. Aggrieved. The profound underworld realm experts of the Milky Way auction house looked as if they had eaten a fly. A cold killing intent flashed past the depths of Zhu Xiaoning's eyes. The other party's series of sneak attacks had completely infuriated her. However, she didn't even see the other party's shadow. So what if she was furious? Miss, the teleportation array has been destroyed. We can only fly to the next teleportation array. The journey is long, and I'm afraid we'll encounter even more dangers. A dark insight expert walked over and said helplessly, if it wasn't for the fact that the solar system was too remote and didn't have any teleportation arrays, they would have already arrived at another star system. One must know that in some galaxies, the distance between 2 galaxies is not that far. Insightful netherworld realm experts could quickly travel between 2 galaxies. Zhu Xiaoning nodded slightly. Wait here for a moment. Those nether insight realm experts didn't say anything and only nodded slightly. Then, they all gathered around Zhu Xiaoning to protect her. They all knew what Zhu Xiaoning was waiting for. Waiting for Yu. Moreover, this little fellow who was only at the Bright World Realm Level 9 reacted so quickly that they felt ashamed. If not for him, Zhu Xiaoning would have been injured. Of course, Zhu Xiaoning had her own trump cards. Whether or not she would be injured was still a question. However, Yu had saved Zhu Xiaoning's life, so these netherworld insight experts were grateful. In less than an hour, Morong appeared in front of everyone again. When she saw Morong, Zhu Xiaoning's eyes lit up. This was because she noticed that Morong's essence, energy, and spirit had already recovered to their peak. How did he look injured at all? Wasn't his recovery speed too terrifying? Zhu Xiaoning couldn't help but be shocked. She had seen how serious Morong's injuries were with her own eyes. If it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to fully recover without tens of thousands of years. The more she knew, the more shocked she was. Right now, Zhu Xiaoning was getting more and more curious about Morong. After Morong appeared, he first looked left and right before looking at Zhu Xiaoning. At the same time, his killing intent surged as he said, "Zhu Xiaoning, do you want to find those bastards hiding in the shadows who don't dare to show themselves?" Morong was furious. If this were to continue, he might be implicated and die at some point. Moreover, if he hadn't reacted quickly this time, he would have died long ago. Even so, his losses were extremely terrifying. He had used up a lot of sun crystals and high-grade origin crystals. The eyes of Zhu Xiaoning and even those nether insight experts lit up. However, they didn't find anything. How could Morong find anything? It wasn't that they looked down on Morong, but that it was impossible. However, when she thought of Morong's various miraculous abilities, Zhu Xiaoning couldn't help but ask, "Can you find them?" Morong nodded, then shook his head. He couldn't guarantee that he could find them. However, the other party thought that they didn't leave any traces. In reality, their auras were still left behind in the endless starry sky. Others might not be able to see those traces that had almost disappeared. However, in Morong's eyes, the auras they left behind were as obvious as fireflies in the night. "I can't guarantee that I can find them, but I can follow them. It's up to you whether you want to follow them or not," Morong said indifferently. After all, the leader this time was Zhu Xiaoning, not him. Otherwise, he would have already killed his way over. Zhu Xiaoning pondered for a moment. She knew that the reason why the other party had done so much was because of the item on her body. If it didn't deal with the other party, who knew what was waiting for them ahead? If they dealt with them, they could continue forward. "All right, let's follow them. What do you do next?" Zhu Xiaoning quickly decided. The other Netherworld insight experts couldn't even refute her. Actually, the other Nether Enlightenment Realm experts had a bellyful of rage as well. Although the item they were escorting was a supreme treasure, there was no time limit. If they didn't deal with these people, they might not even reach their destination. Thus, the group followed Morong on their journey. However, they soon began to have doubts. Morong flew back and forth in the boundless starry sky without a single trace to follow. Was he really following them? Although they didn't believe it, they didn't say anything. However, Zhu Xiaoning and Morong were friends, so she approached and prepared to ask. "When we win the spatial treasure, just now, I burned 20 million high-grade origin crystals. Shouldn't you compensate me?" Before Zhu Xiaoning could speak, Morong stopped her. Zhu Xiaoning rolled her eyes. "Didn't you say that you're so willful because you're rich? It's only 20 million high-grade origin crystals. You don't even care about it, do you?" Morong was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "That's a completely different matter. Those 20 million high-grade origin crystals were used to protect you. So, you should compensate me." Zhu Xiaoning rolled her eyes at Morong, then waved her hand and threw a spatial treasure to Morong. "There are 30 million high-grade origin crystals inside. Apart from the compensation, there's another 10 million as your reward for protecting me. You're really giving it to me?" Morong couldn't help but be stunned by this rich Miss Zhu. He was just joking. He didn't expect Zhu Xiaoning to be so generous. Of course, this also showed how rich the Milky Way auction house was. "You don't want it? Then give it back to me." As she spoke, Zhu Xiaoning reached out. However, the spatial treasure had already disappeared from Morong's hand. "I know you guys are very curious about how I track them. That's my secret, so I can't tell you. However, it's fine as long as you believe me. I believe we can find them in a few days." Morong suddenly said confidently. "Why?" "Because after tracking them, Morong found that the auras were getting stronger and stronger. The stronger the aura, the stronger the aura. What did a strong aura mean? It meant that the other party hadn't been here for long. Moreover, Moronyu also found that the other party's aura wasn't just a few people, but more and more. A group. Since it was a secret, Zhu Xiaoning didn't continue asking. Instead, she chose to believe in Moronyu. The other Dark Insight Realm experts naturally didn't say anything. It was only a few days. They could afford to waste it. 5 days later, Moronyu suddenly stopped in the starry sky. Zhu Xiaoning approached. Just as she was about to ask, Morongyu's voice sounded. If I'm not wrong, the planet in front is their gathering place. Because it was too far away, they couldn't see everything on the planet clearly. However, they could extend their divine sense. However, if what Moronyu said was true, then they would alert the enemy if they extended their divine sense. You guys find a planet here and hide. I'll go scout the situation. Moronyu said, then disappeared in a flash. Zhu Xiaoning was about to say something, but Moronyu was already gone. Can any of you see Moronyu? Zhu Xiaoning used her divine sense to scan the nearby void, but didn't find Moronyu. Thus, she asked the Dark Insight Realm experts. After a while, some of the Dark Insight Realm experts shook their heads in shock. This was because they didn't find Moronyu either. Morongyu's concealment ability was just too terrifying. Then, was Morongyu's concealment ability really that powerful? If he was only concealing himself, those Dark Insight Realm experts wouldn't be able to find him. However, if he moved, he would definitely cause the surrounding void to fluctuate. Then, he would be unavoidably discovered, unless he moved extremely slowly. In reality, Moronyu entered Hichu Luoshu and teleported to another planet. He didn't want Zhu Xiaoning and the others to find out what he was doing. Thus, he had to sneak over from another direction. Then, why did Moronyu want to take the risk? There were so many Dark Insight Realm experts in the Milky Way auction house. They should have been sent to scout for information. Why did he have to do it himself? It was because when he got close to the planet, Morongyu's soul trembled. What did this mean? It meant that there might be a soul-related treasure ahead. Something that could make Morongyu's soul react was definitely not an ordinary treasure. Chapter 2029. Moronyu concealed himself and cautiously flew towards the planet in front of him. However, his speed wasn't slow at all. Soon, he was already close to the small planet. At this time, Morongyu's speed was even slower, because he clearly felt that the incomparably powerful aura of the drum was like a prehistoric beast entrenched on the planet. It was obvious that these powerful auras belonged to the strongest people on the other side. Moronyu even felt that one of the auras was even stronger than the strongest profound underworld realm expert in the Milky Way auction house. Any profound underworld realm expert could easily kill Moronyu, let alone this expert who had reached the intermediate profound underworld realm. Therefore, Moronyu had to be very careful. However, the closer he got to the small planet, the more Morongyu's soul throbbed. It was as if there was something on the planet that made him very excited. In fact, Moronyu even felt that his soul showed a desire to devour. Moronyu suppressed his throbbing soul and began to slowly sneak in. Slowly, he arrived in front of those people. What came into view was an incomparably huge starry sky ship, about the size of a mountain, docked on the ground. And the auras that Moronyu felt came from this huge ship. The huge ship was completely black, but there were huge skulls carved all over the ship's body. And the huge skull on the ship was even more obvious. There was even the word skeleton written under the skull. Using a skull as a symbol, presumably they were not good people. And although Moronyu did not get close, he heard bursts of laughter, which contained all kinds of obscenities. Looking from afar, those people were not cultivating, but eating meat and drinking wine in large mouthfuls. How did they look like cultivators? He was just like a vulgar layman. Moronyu frowned slightly. Seeing this scene, it reminded him of the bandits he often encountered in the past. Bandits! Suddenly, Moronyu's heart moved. Could it be that these people were the legendary Starry Sky Bandits? Interstellar Bandits were an organization of force. To put it bluntly, they were bandits. However, It often appeared in the endless starry sky, robbing in the endless starry sky. Usually, these space bandits were extremely vicious people, and their strength was usually not weak. Moreover, because these interstellar bandits robbed and left, they did not have a fixed nest at all. Or rather, he didn't know where the nest was. Therefore, there were no forces that could exterminate these space bandits. Murong-Yu had heard about the galactic bandits when he was in the solar system. However, because the solar system was too barren, even the interstellar bandits rarely visited. Otherwise, with the strength of the solar system, they would not be able to stop the galactic bandits. This was because every group of space bandits had at least one Insight Realm expert. If they were space bandits, Murong-Yu's eyes flickered. These interstellar bandits had plundered everywhere and accumulated a terrifying amount of treasures. Not to mention anything else, just the huge starry sky ship he saw was a treasure. It was at least an Insight Realm treasure that could shuttle through the endless starry sky. And because it was a starry sky ship, this kind of huge ship was extremely fast, much faster than ordinary Insight Realm experts. Moreover, it had an extremely strong defensive ability. However, the thing that made Murong-Yu's soul palpitate was definitely not this ship. Finally, Murong-Yu's gaze stopped on the huge flag of the huge ship. There was a huge skull hanging on the flag, the size of a small mountain, and it was a human skull. He did not know what this skull was, but it was gently rotating on the spot, emitting a white light that enveloped the entire ship. When Murong-Yu looked at the skull, his soul palpitated even more intensely. Murong-Yu finally confirmed that what made his soul palpitate was this huge skull. However, what exactly was in that skull that made his soul palpitate? The skull should be a magic treasure that belonged to someone on the starry sky ship, or a treasure that was directly connected to the ship. How was he going to obtain that skull? The only way was to kill this group of evil space bandits. However, there were more space bandits than the Milky Way auction house. Could the auction house kill them? Murong-Yu was somewhat unwilling to leave just like that. This was because he could feel that the reason why the skull made his soul palpitate and made his soul desire to devour it was very likely to increase his soul realm. Steal it. Murong-Yu shook his head and rejected this crazy idea. This was simply impossible. So, the only thing left was to snatch it. However, Murong-Yu's strength was only at the half-step Insight Realm. How was he going to snatch it? Puppet. Murong-Yu's heart skipped a beat. Didn't he have a puppet? Moreover, that puppet's strength was not weak. If it could explode with all its might, he might really be able to snatch the skull. After thinking about it, Murong-Yu entered the Hichu Luo Shu. Walala. He threw all 70 to 80 million high-grade origin crystals into the puppet's body. Moreover, this was not enough. Finally, Murong-Yu threw in all the remaining tens of thousands of sun crystals. Murong-Yu did not make a move. Instead, he slowly sneaked over and finally stopped in the sky above the giant space ship. He did not intend to inform Zhu Xiaoning and the others. If he made a move with them, he did not intend to expose the puppet. Moreover, it would be more difficult for him to obtain that skull after making a move. After all, if he did not make a move, why would the Milky Way auction house give him the spoils of war? More importantly, Murong-Yu did not have much confidence in the Milky Way auction house. With a thought, Murong-Yu threw 10 million high-grade origin crystals into the puppet's altar. At the same time, it immediately burst into flames. Boom! Murong-Yu felt that the puppet, which was extremely similar to the sect master of the infernal Tao, shook violently. Then, he felt that the puppet's aura was rapidly increasing. Rebirth Realm, Chaos Realm, Bright World Realm. Within a few breaths, the puppet's aura had increased to the Dark World Realm. It was extremely fast. Of course, the price that Murong-Yu paid was that half of the 10 million high-grade origin crystals were burnt. 5 million high-grade origin crystals were gone, just like that. Without any hesitation, Murong-Yu immediately controlled the puppet to rush out of Hichu Luo Shu and shoot towards the giant spaceship below. Enemy attack. The moment the puppet appeared, an ear-piercing alarm sounded from the giant spaceship. Then, one by one, the interstellar bandits came to their senses and began to attack the puppets. However, the puppet had already reached the space above the giant spaceship. At the same time, a palm the size of a small mountain fiercely slammed down towards the starship. "You're courting death." A cold voice floated out from the giant spaceship. Then, an incomparably huge palm shattered the void and blasted towards the puppet's palm. Yu, who was inside the puppet, clearly saw that the person who attacked was one of the strongest space bandits. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the attacks of the two sides had already collided. After an earth-shattering explosion, the void was directly torn apart like a piece of cloth with the point of contact as the center. The hand of the powerful interstellar bandit was directly shattered into pieces. The entire giant spaceship shook violently. However, the puppet wasn't damaged at all. It didn't even slow down. Of course, it didn't mean that the puppet didn't pay any price. Under this attack, another few million high-grade essence crystals were completely exhausted of their energy, turning into fine powder. This appetite was even more terrifying than Yu's. The high-grade origin crystals that defeated Yu came easily, but it also made him feel the pinch. And the more it was so, the more he wanted to get the skull. The puppet's palm shattered the void and continued to slam down. At this moment, another powerful palm blasted out from the giant spaceship. It was the strongest space bandit. Whoosh! The puppet's second hand finally attacked. Reaching out, he grabbed the skull in the sky above the starship. At this moment, its other hand had already clashed with the most powerful space bandit. Crack! Nearly 2,000 high-grade origin crystals were directly shattered because the power contained in them had been exhausted. One could imagine how terrifying the strength of the strongest space bandit was. At this moment, the skull was already grabbed by the puppet's other hand. It didn't resist or struggle as expected. Yu was flabbergasted, as if he was a docile lamb. However, this was the best outcome. Therefore, Yu took advantage of the momentum and was directly blasted away. He escaped just like that. The space bandits on the giant spaceship looked at the puppet that disappeared from their sight in disbelief. They had a strange look on their faces. They originally thought that they had encountered the apologists or their enemies, but they didn't expect that the other party would attack with such great fanfare just to strengthen the useless skull. "Boss, should we chase after him and kill him?" A middle-aged man hovered above the giant spaceship and looked at the place where Yu disappeared with a solemn expression. A young man next to him asked for instructions with a murderous look. "That person's strength is quite terrifying. He's definitely not below me. Since he only wants to snatch the useless skull, let's forget about it. After all, business is more important," said the leader of the space bandits. "Although the skull is somewhat extraordinary, we only used it as a lamp for illumination. Why did he snatch it away? Could it be that the skull is some kind of treasure?" The young man muttered with a strange expression. He found it unbelievable. "Forget it. We won't be able to learn anything from the skull here anyway. Let's leave this place first." The leader of the space bandits waved his hand and started the giant spaceship. It was only a lamp for illumination. If Yu found out that the skull he spent a lot of resources to snatch was only a lamp for illumination, would he be so angry that he would vomit blood? Chapter 2030. What? The skeletons? That should be the skeleton bandits. After hearing Yu's words, Zhu Xiaoning and the others frowned slightly. They didn't expect to be targeted by these bandits. Moreover, they had been ambushed several times. Seeing Zhu Xiaoning and the others' reaction, Yu rolled his eyes and asked hesitantly, "Is this skeleton bandits very famous?" Although the skeleton bandits had someone stronger than the strongest person in the Milky Way auction house, Zhu Xiaoning and the others didn't need to have such a big reaction, right? The skeleton bandits are a famous and powerful bandit group in the Milky Way star field. Legend has it that there are many terrifying existences in the skeleton bandits that surpass the Dark Insight realm. The bandits you saw were only a portion of the skeleton bandits. Zhu Xiaoning explained. See existences surpassing the Dark Insight realm? Then this bandit group really wasn't ordinary. It was no wonder that Zhu Xiaoning and the others' expressions changed. If they hadn't encountered a portion of the bandits this time, Morongyu probably wouldn't have been able to come back. Moreover, Morongyu actually went to rob the bandits. This was like scratching an itch on a tiger's head. He didn't know the difference between life and death. Thinking back, Morongyu felt a chill run down his spine and broke out in a cold sweat. Zhu Xiaoning frowned as she said, "The most important question right now is whether the entire bandit group is targeting us, or is it just a small group? If it was just a small group targeting them, then it would be easier to deal with. After all, those people weren't very strong and didn't have powerful reinforcements. However, if it was the entire skeleton bandits, then they would be in danger." Morongyu shrugged. Whether it was true or not, it didn't have much to do with him. At worst, he could just escape. After all, he wasn't from the Milky Way auction house. He didn't even know what they were escorting. He also didn't have any obligation to fight alongside them. Or rather, he didn't have the qualifications because of his strength. Thus, Morongyu left and let Zhu Xiaoning and the others discuss among themselves. On the other hand, a strand of his divine sense had already entered the He Tu and the Book of the Luo, observing the enormous skull that he had spent tens of millions of high-grade origin crystals to obtain. This was definitely the head of a peerless expert. Moreover, it was a human. Morongyu didn't need to study to be able to confirm this. However, this human's head was too big. It was like a small mountain. Morongyu's soul continuously throbbed his soul, emitting an incomparably greedy desire to devour. Morongyu's curiosity was piqued as he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary from the head. Apart from the intense light emitted by the skull, the rest of them were extremely powerful. Shua. A strand of Morongyu's divine sense rushed into the incomparably huge skull. At this moment, Morongyu was astonished. His face was filled with shock. What did he see? Soul force. Incomparably vast and incomparably pure soul power. However, this wasn't what shocked Morongyu. What shocked him was that he had clearly only entered the skull, but it was as if he had entered the skull's soul space. The skull's soul space was several times larger than his own. This place was filled with raging waves of soul power. Normally, the soul space was another space inside the head. However, it definitely wasn't the entire head. The entire soul space of this skull occupied the entire area of the skull. In other words, his entire head was his soul space. How is this possible? Morongyu was a little surprised, because even though the soul space was constantly expanding, it was still a separate space. It wouldn't occupy the other spaces in the head. When others didn't enter the soul space, they wouldn't be able to see how big the soul space was. After checking, he found that this soul power was ownerless and incomparably pure. There were no impurities or memories. Thus, Morongyu couldn't find the answers he wanted from these soul memories. Moreover, this skull itself was a treasure. These soul powers were like raging waves, but they didn't dissipate at all. This skeleton was like a formation, locking down the soul power and preventing it from flowing away. Morongyu thought to himself, even without the massive amount of soul force, this skull can still be considered a rare treasure. Looking at the massive amount of soul power, Morongyu finally understood why his soul was throbbing. Such pure, powerful, and enormous soul power was enough to raise his soul by several small realms. It wouldn't be difficult to reach the peak of the Bright World realm or even break through to the creation realm. As long as my soul breaks through, it will be easier for my physical body to break through. Morongyu thought and forcibly resisted the desire to devour the soul power to raise his soul realm. He withdrew his consciousness from the Hichu, Luo Shu. Morongyu, we plan to chase after the skeleton bandits. Hurry up and follow us. Morongyu's consciousness had just retreated from the Hichu Luo Shu when Zhu Xiaoning's words rang in his ears. Morongyu nodded his head and followed after her. These people decided to chase after the skeleton bandits after receiving Morongyu's information. It was obvious that they had a certain degree of confidence in obtaining all the treasures in one fell swoop. Thus, under Morongyu's lead, everyone quickly chased after them. However, because of Murong Yu's previous actions, the skeleton bandits had already retreated from that planet. However, it didn't matter. As long as Murong Yu was there, they couldn't escape. In the end, after a few days, they found the skeleton bandits on another planet. These skeleton bandits' target was Zhu Xiaoning and the others, so they wouldn't have gone far. Therefore, they quickly caught up to him. Murong Yu didn't participate in the battle. Instead, he waited alone on a nearby planet. This wasn't his battle to begin with, and Zhu Xiaoning didn't want him to take the risk. To her, Murong Yu's help was already more than enough. It just so happened that Murong Yu could make use of this opportunity to raise his soul realm. However, before Murong Yu could devour much soul power, a cry of alarm sounded. "Murong Yu, run!" Murong Yu jumped in fright and opened his eyes, just in time to see Zhu Xiaoning's messy hair and flustered expression. She turned into a streak of light and shot over from the front. Behind her, there were a few experts with terrifying auras following closely behind. They were all Dark Insight Realm experts. Murong Yu was stunned because the people chasing after Zhu Xiaoning weren't experts from the Milky Way auction house, nor were they experts from the skeleton bandits, but a few unfamiliar experts. With a thought, Murong Yu had already soared into the sky, turning into a streak of light that crashed into Zhu Xiaoning. Zhu Xiaoning was extremely fast, but Murong Yu was even faster. Moreover, Zhu Xiaoning didn't expect Murong Yu to pounce on her. Therefore, in less than an instant, the two of them were about to collide in the void. Thus, Zhu Xiaoning let out a cry of alarm. "Don't resist!" At this moment, Murong Yu's voice sounded in Zhu Xiaoning's ears. In the next instant, Zhu Xiaoning felt a large hand wrap around her. Then, she saw the scenery in front of her change and disappear into the endless starry sky. Teleport! Murong Yu hugged Zhu Xiaoning, and after the two of them entered the Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu activated the Hichu Luoshu's teleportation ability and directly teleported out. However, Murong Yu didn't teleport too far away, and instead teleported to the planet they had been to before. It wasn't very far from before. "Zhu Xiaoning, what's going on? Who are the people chasing after you?" Murong Yu looked at Zhu Xiaoning in confusion. Weren't they chasing after the skeleton bandits? How did they end up in this state? Zhu Xiaoning's face was pale as she shook her head. She didn't immediately speak, as if she was organizing her words, or as if she was still in shock. After a long time, she slowly said, "We're finished. Other than me, I'm afraid everyone else is dead." Murong Yu had already expected this. With Zhu Xiaoning's strength, those experts from the Milky Way auction house must have risked their lives to protect her. However, not a single one of them came back with her. The outcome was already very clear. The people chasing after me are also from the skeleton bandits. They hid in the spatial treasure long ago, so neither you nor I noticed. When we attacked the skeleton bandits, these people were released. There are even high-level Insight Realm experts among them. So that was the case. No wonder even Murong Yu hadn't noticed. However, if the other party even had high-level Insight Realm experts, why didn't they just directly kill Zhu Xiaoning and the others? Instead, they set up an ambush. Although our Milky Way auction house is only an auction house, not just anyone can bully us. Once news of them robbing us spreads, our Milky Way auction house will definitely not let them off. Thus, they want to kill us, but they don't want to expose themselves. Zhu Xiaoning seemed to know what Murong Yu was thinking and sneered. Not good. Murong Yu's expression suddenly changed, and he activated the Hichu Luoshu's teleportation ability again. This was because he could clearly see that the Netherworld experts who had been chasing Zhu Xiaoning earlier were charging straight at him. Incomparably accurate. They were certain of Zhu Xiaoning's location. Divination? That was impossible. Then the most likely possibility was that Zhu Xiaoning's body had been tampered with. Even Hichu Luoshu couldn't cut off their connection. What's going on? Zhu Xiaoning's heart sank. They've caught up. Murong Yu's eyes flashed as he looked at Zhu Xiaoning. They've tampered with your body. Zhu Xiaoning's expression changed slightly, and she began to examine herself. Not long later, her expression became extremely ugly. There's a strange power in my body. As long as this strange power exists, the person who planted it can sense my location. Chapter 2031. It should be the power planted by that high-level, profound, underworld cultivator. Morong Yu was about to try to expel that power for Zhu Xiaoning. However, he gave up after hearing this. How could he expel the power of a high-level, profound, underworld cultivator? What should I do? Morong Yu was a little speechless. In this situation, no matter where Morong Yu went, the other party would catch up. It was only a matter of time, unless he was able to travel extremely far away. However, Morong Yu had never left the solar system. Within the solar system, the other party would definitely be able to sense it. Moreover, even if Morong Yu wanted to leave the solar system now, without the help of Hichu Luoshu's teleportation ability, his speed was far inferior to that of a high-level, profound underworld cultivator. In fact, Morong Yu could still go to another place. That was the rising sundown mansion. However, the entire skeleton bandits had their eyes on Zhu Xiaoning. What if he lured them over? That would not be worth the loss. Perhaps a high-level, profound underworld cultivator could not cross the spatial turbulence to reach the rising sundown mansion. But what about those terrifying existences that surpass the profound underworld realm? Morong Yu did not want them to discover the rising sundown mansion. That was his greatest trump card so far. Morong Yu, leave by yourself. Don't worry about me. Zhu Xiaoning knew that she was at her wit's end. Therefore, she said with a bitter smile. Morong Yu shook his head. You are my friend. How can I leave you at this critical moment? In fact, Morong Yu had something else in his heart that he did not say. If it weren't for you, how could I leave the solar system so quickly? It could be said that the current situation forced Morong Yu to not give up on Zhu Xiaoning. Otherwise, if the Lin family came looking for him, Morong Yu would still suffer a tragedy. He might as well fight it out now. You will die from exhaustion. Zhu Xiaoning looked at Morong Yu with shining eyes. Don't worry, I won't die so easily. Besides, it won't be easy for them to catch us. Morong Yu smiled faintly and activated Hichu Luoshu's teleportation function. Whoosh! When he reappeared, Hichu Luoshu was already inside the Sun Religion. This place was extremely far away from the previous place. No matter how fast the other party was, he wouldn't be able to catch up to them in a short period of time. It would be best if the other party caught up with them, and it would be best if they fought with the Lin family and perished together. This was to prevent Morong Yu from hiding. Moreover, even if the other party couldn't fight, Morong Yu could just teleport again. Teleport to the original location, then continue to use the teleportation array. Although the solar system wasn't big, it was impossible for a profound netherworld realm expert to cross half of the solar system in a single step. If they kept going in circles like this, they might not be able to catch up to Morong Yu even after he left the solar system. They won't be able to catch up to us in a few months. You should rest well during this time. I'm going to cultivate first. Morong Yu ignored Zhu Xiaoning's shock and confusion and left to cultivate. Now that he had a huge amount of soul power, why didn't he use this time to increase his strength? Morong Yu, don't you want to know what I'm escorting? A treasure that even the skeleton bandits are after? Zhu Xiaoning looked at Morong Yu's back and suddenly shouted. Morong Yu turned around and looked at Zhu Xiaoning. This is your secret. If you want to tell me, you can tell me. I won't force you. Zhu Xiaoning smiled faintly as she looked at Morong Yu, her eyes flickering with a charming light. What I have is the inheritance of a peak-level heaven-tier expert. Zhu Xiaoning finally revealed the supreme treasure she had on her. Morong Yu blinked. His expression was normal, and there was no change in his expression. He had no idea what the celestial realm was, or how powerful it was. Oh, that's it? Then I'm going to cultivate first. Morong Yu turned around and was about to leave. However, he was stopped by Zhu Xiaoning. Aren't you tempted? Zhu Xiaoning looked at Morong Yu with some doubt. Morong Yu had a strange expression. Why should I be tempted? Is it very precious? Zhu Xiaoning was about to faint. The inheritance of a peak celestial realm expert. What kind of existence was that? There were only 10 celestial realm experts in the Milky Way star field. Moreover, those 10 people were only low-level celestial realm experts. One could imagine how precious the inheritance of a peak celestial realm expert was. Once this news spread out, the entire Milky Way star field would be shaken, and blood would flow throughout the Milky Way star field. Morongyu is still indifferent. The Netherworld realm can create small worlds, and the creation realm above the Netherworld realm can create large worlds. Creation origin star. The celestial realm is above the creation realm. Zhu Xiaoning explained. Morongyu was slightly moved. It turns out that the Milky Way star field is not as powerful as I thought. There are only 10 low-level celestial realm experts. If it was before, Morongyu might have been overjoyed. He might even have thought about the inheritance of a peak celestial realm expert. However, he now had the Rising Sundown Mansion. The Rising Sundown Mansion did not have many things, but had many inheritances. Moreover, Morongyu was sure that the inheritance of a celestial realm expert in the Rising Sundown Mansion was definitely much better than what Zhu Xiaoning had. He had a mountain of treasures, so why would he be tempted? Of course, if it was not an inheritance, but a treasure that could increase his strength, Morongyu would have been tempted long ago. All right, you can cultivate. I'm going to cultivate too. After Morongyu said this, he took a step and disappeared from Zhu Xiaoning's sight. You're not tempted at all? Morongyu, who are you? I can't see through you anymore, Zhu Xiaoning muttered to herself. The inheritance of a peak celestial realm expert was something that even those celestial realm experts would try their best to snatch. However, Morongyu was not tempted at all. It was really puzzling. Why are they suddenly so far away? The Insight Realm experts who were chasing Zhu Xiaoning stopped at the place where Morongyu and Zhu Xiaoning had appeared. The strongest Insight Realm expert among them frowned slightly. Although they did not understand why Zhu Xiaoning suddenly went so far away, the skeleton bandits still chased after her. Just because of the inheritance of a peak celestial realm expert in Zhu Xiaoning's body, it was worth their entire bandit group taking action. As long as they obtained the inheritance of a peak celestial realm expert, the leader of the skeleton bandits will be able to break through to the celestial realm in one fell swoop and become the 11th celestial realm expert in the Milky Way star field. From then on, they would be on par with the other 10 celestial realm experts. At that time, the skeleton bandits would no longer be afraid of being attacked by other forces. In fact, they could even openly walk between the major galaxies. Who would dare to touch them? And if the inheritance of a peak celestial realm expert was obtained by the Milky Way auction house's ancestor, the skeleton bandits would have a hard time, because the Milky Way auction house also had a peak creation realm ancestor. Once that ancestor broke through, he might be the first to destroy the skeleton bandits. When these bandits anxiously rushed to the vicinity of the sun star, Morongyu, who was in the midst of cultivation, had already sensed it. These guys are really persistent. Morongyu opened his eyes, and a cold, killing intent flashed past his eyes. These bandits must have used the ancient teleportation array, so only a few days had passed. After these days of cultivation, Morongyu's soul had also broken through, and he had already broken through from the early stage of the Bright World realm to the middle stage. Shua! Without any hesitation, Morongyu activated Hichu Luoshu's teleportation ability and directly teleported away from the Sun Star. The Sun Star's experts did not even have a mid-stage Insight Realm expert. Using the Lin Jiafeng duo to block them, perhaps those two cowards would directly admit defeat. Moreover, once the opponent froze the space of the entire Sun Star, Morongyu would not be able to teleport even if he wanted to. Running again? Just as the Skeleton Bandit's high-level Insight Realm expert was about to make a move, he discovered that Zhu Xiaoning had suddenly appeared in an extremely distant place. F***CK. The high-level Insight Realm expert could not help but curse, and then hurriedly chased after her. As for the other Netherworld Realm experts, they chased after him with gloomy expressions. Should we report this matter to our superiors? A Netherworld Insight expert asked in a low voice. If a creation realm expert came, it would be difficult for Murong Yu to escape. Report your grandpa. If those creation realm experts come, how will there be a share for us? Are you all idiots? The high-level Netherworld Insight expert cursed at his subordinates. The few Nether Insight realm experts smiled embarrassedly, and then they followed obediently. However, there was still an Insight realm expert who secretly sent out a message. This was a matter of great importance. If they could not capture Zhu Xiaoning, they would all die. Merit and life, this person still chose life. Thus, in the following period of time, Murong Yu directly played hide and seek with them. After hiding for a period of time, Murong Yu's soul realm was finally forcefully broken through to the peak of the Bright World realm, the same level as his cultivation. Now he was only missing the physical body realm. As long as his physical body realm also reached the peak of the Bright World realm, Murong Yu would be able to break through and reach the creation realm in one go. At that time, he would have the strength of an Insight realm expert. However, in these few days, Murong Yu suddenly felt uneasy in his heart. A sense of danger shrouded his heart. Could it be that the skeleton bandits couldn't catch up to me, so they sent a creation realm expert? If that's the case, I have no way of escaping at all. Murong Yu thought helplessly. If that was the case, Murong Yu's desire to increase his strength became even stronger. However, Zhu Xiaoning had already asked the Milky Way auction house for help. He believed that the creation realm experts from the Milky Way auction house would be arriving soon. With Genesis tier elites battling in the solar system, who knew if the entire solar system would also be destroyed? A seemingly absurd idea suddenly appeared in Murong Yu's heart. Chapter 2032. Wang. Suddenly, Murong Yu's soul trembled. Following that, Murong Yu felt the space outside the Hichu, Luo Shu tremble slightly. Murong Yu's expression changed drastically. Why did his soul suddenly tremble? This kind of situation had happened many times in the past. It wasn't because he sensed a treasure, but because he sensed danger. This was a warning from Murong Yu's soul. He had just teleported far away from the skeleton bandits' pursuit. How could this happen? Then there was only one possibility. The creation realm expert of the skeleton bandits had arrived in the solar system. That was a terrifying existence that surpassed the Netherworld realm. There was a gap of 3 whole realms between him and Murong Yu. Against an expert of this level, Murong Yu would definitely die. Murong Yu, I suddenly had a bad feeling. Perhaps the creation realm expert of the skeleton bandits has already arrived in the solar system. Moreover, it's very likely that he's an expert of the creation realm. Zhu Xiaoning found Murong Yu and said with a serious expression. Murong Yu looked at Zhu Xiaoning with a strange gaze. He was surprised that Zhu Xiaoning's feeling was also so terrifying. The reason why he could sense danger in advance was completely because he cultivated the 9 syllables mantra. I'm born with an extremely sharp sense of unknown danger. Moreover, if I can sense it, it's usually a great danger. This time, I'm afraid our lives will be in danger, Zhu Xiaoning said with a serious expression. Murong Yu, don't worry about me. Let me leave alone, Zhu Xiaoning said seriously to Murong Yu. Murong Yu had already helped her too much these days. She really didn't want to drag Murong Yu down. Murong Yu shook his head. He definitely wouldn't leave at this time. He wasn't that kind of person. When will the experts of the Milky Way auction house come? They'll probably come in a few days. But we definitely won't last 3 days. The divine sense of a Genesis realm powerhouse is extremely terrifying. Although it cannot cover the entire solar system, if a few Genesis realm powerhouses pursue us from different directions, we will not be able to escape at all. How troublesome. Murong Yu furrowed his brows, thinking about how to avoid those peerless powerhouses. I do know of a secret realm in the solar system. It's not far from us. With our speed, we can enter within a day. That mystic realm had a great suppressive effect on one's divine will. Even one's strength was suppressed. However, there are ferocious beasts running amok inside. It's very terrifying. Murong Yu's eyes lit up. Then what are we waiting for? Let's just head over. Murong Yu and Zhu Xiaoning had already left the He Tu and Luo Shu. At this point, Zhu Xiaoning finally understood the wonders of Hichu Luo Shu. However, she was a smart person and knew what she shouldn't ask. After identifying the direction, Murong Yu and Wang Chong set off. At this time, Murong Yu's soul trembled even more violently. His entire heart was enveloped by an intense aura of danger. And as time passed, that feeling of danger grew stronger and stronger. In fact, after half a day, that feeling of danger had already risen to a feeling of death. Are we there yet? I feel that the bandits are getting closer and closer to us, and they are approaching at an extremely terrifying speed. Murong Yu urged on the way. If Murong Yu and Wang Chong's current speed was the speed of a snail, then the bandit speed was the speed of a golden-winged roc. This was the difference between the two. After a while, Murong Yu said in a low voice, "There's less than an hour left. They will definitely catch up." The speed of a Genesis Realm powerhouse was too terrifying. The solar system was so big, but they were like taking a stroll, crossing countless light years with a single step. Right? How are they going to let people live? We're almost there, Zhu Xiaoning replied. There was still an endless starry sky in front of them. There was no secret realm at all. Murong Yu knew that what she meant by almost here was probably true. But perhaps the powerful Genesis Realm powerhouses had arrived first, and not them. "Give me all the origin crystals you have, quick." Murong Yu's soul was about to tremble and faint. This meant that danger was getting closer and closer to him. "Here you go." Zhu Xiaoning did not suspect anything. She placed all the origin crystals in a spatial treasure and handed it to Murong Yu. Walala, Murong Yu placed all the hundreds of millions of high-grade origin crystals on the altar inside the puppet. Once the bandits arrived, the puppet would be his only support. 15 minutes. They will catch up in 15 minutes, Murong Yu said in a low voice. At this time, they could clearly feel that there were a few extremely terrifying auras rapidly approaching from behind them. In fact, the bandits were still far away, but the space behind Murong Yu was already condensing from the impact. In fact, some small planets could not withstand the terrifying pressure and shattered. Fortunately, Murong Yu and the others had all come from uninhabited places. Otherwise, many people would have died. "We're here," Zhu Xiaoning suddenly cheered. Murong Yu raised his head and looked over, only to see an incomparably huge whirlpool spinning in the void before him. From afar, it actually looked a little similar to the Heavenly Eye. The Heavenly Eye? This thought flashed through Murong Yu's mind. Then, he grabbed Zhu Xiaoning, and his speed increased explosively. Rumble. At the same time, a huge hand with a terrifying aura that could destroy the world tore through the starry sky and grabbed the two of them. Wherever the hand passed, whether it was planets, meteors, or even the void, everything was shattered. At this moment, the aura of death in Murong Yu's heart rose to the limit. "Zhu Xiaoning, lend me your power," Murong Yu roared. Zhu Xiaoning's hand was already on his body, and an endless stream of power surged into his body. Meanwhile, Murong Yu had already raised his power to the limit. With the addition of Zhu Xiaoning's power, his speed suddenly increased explosively, and he directly smashed through the void, rushing toward the whirlpool in the sky. However, although his speed had increased explosively, the distance between him and the Genesis Realm Cultivator's hand was still rapidly shrinking. Meanwhile, the Genesis Realm Cultivator behind Murong Yu revealed a look of disdain. If the two bright World Realm Cultivators behind Murong Yu could escape from the hands of a Genesis Realm Cultivator, that would really be a miracle. There was no escape at all. However, the Genesis Realm Cultivator's hand was about to grab Murong Yu and Zhu Xiaoning. However, at this moment, an incomparably huge figure suddenly appeared between the two sides. Then, an incomparably huge fist slammed into the Genesis Realm Cultivator's hand. What appeared out of thin air was precisely a puppet. When she saw the puppet appear, Zhu Xiaoning, who was caught in Murong Yu's arms, was shocked, because she discovered that this puppet's power was actually about the same as the Genesis Realm Cultivator chasing after them. Most importantly, she didn't know who this puppet was. Could it be a creature created by the other party? Boom! Caught off guard, the Genesis Realm cultivator's hand was directly shattered. At this moment, the close to 1 billion high-grade origin crystals in the puppet's body were also completely consumed, and they were all turned into a pile of powder. Meanwhile, the puppet's huge body also fiercely crashed backward. Behind it was Murong Yu. Murong Yu's face turned green. He immediately wanted to recall the puppet. However, the speed at which the puppet flew backward was really too fast, and he definitely wouldn't be able to recall it in time. He would definitely crash into it. Hichu Luoshu, weapon fragments. In an instant, Murong Yu summoned all of his treasures and placed them behind him. Bang! 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 One by one, the treasures were sent flying, unable to stop the onslaught of the puppets. In the end, Murong Yu felt a huge force slam into his body. With a bang, he saw his body explode into pieces. And in the instant that Murong Yu's body exploded, Zhu Xiaoning, who was in his arms, was already thrown out by him, directly into the secret realm. Crack! The soul in the physical body was also directly smashed into powder because it couldn't dodge in time. After smashing its master, Murong Yu, into powder, the puppet finally succeeded and retreated. It quickly shrank, and Murong Yu stored it in Hichu Luo Shu. Bastard! One day, I'll also smack you to death. Murong Yu was infuriated. This was because he discovered that, although his physical body could still recover, his strength had decreased considerably, about 10%. The physical body could still be recovered after being smashed. This was because, although the physical body had been smashed, it hadn't been destroyed. Instead, it had been reduced to powder that existed in the surrounding space. This was because the physical body and the soul had an extremely close connection. Thus, as long as the soul still had consciousness, it could be easily recovered. However, every time it was smashed, some of its power would dissipate. If it was smashed too many times, the power contained in the powder would be too little. Thus, it couldn't be recovered, and even if it was recovered, it wouldn't be as strong as before. In just this one collision, Murong Yu's physical body had lost 10% of its power. In other words, his physical body was about 10% weaker than before. How could this not infuriate him? However, his opponent was still a Genesis tier cultivator, after all, so he didn't hesitate at all to charge into the secret realm. If the puppet caught up to him, he would undoubtedly die. Murong Yu, are you all right? Originally, when she saw that she was the only one who had entered, Zhu Xiaoning thought that Murong Yu had already died. Thus, she anxiously paced back and forth on the spot, not taking the opportunity to advance. When she saw Murong Yu enter, she rushed over with a look of surprise. Murong Yu shook his head. After sensing the secret realm for a bit, he grabbed Zhu Xiaoning's hand and flew forward. However, Zhu Xiaoning looked at Murong Yu in shock. She couldn't even speak properly. Yeah, you can actually fly here. Can't we fly here? No, right? Other than the fact that our divine sense is greatly suppressed, there isn't anything else out of the ordinary? Murong Yu asked Zhu Xiaoning with a strange expression. Zhu Xiaoning was about to faint. This place suppressed her divine sense greatly, and it also suppressed her cultivation greatly. Moreover, she had already discovered that it was impossible to fly in this secret realm. Chapter 2033. Regardless of whether it was the bright world realm or the profound underworld realm, they couldn't fly here, but Murong Yu could. What did that mean? It meant that Murong Yu had a huge advantage. As long as others couldn't fly, it would be difficult to track down Murong Yu. Moreover, the pressure on one's divine sense and cultivation was extremely fierce here, so long-distance attacks couldn't be launched. It was basically impossible for a large hand to reach out from afar to grab him like before. Moreover, Zhu Xiaoning had been here before, so she knew that there were some places that couldn't be reached without flying. Thus, she suddenly had a lot of confidence in being able to avoid the pursuit of the bandits this time. However, before seeing a Genesis Realm cultivator enter here, she couldn't be sure that she was safe. Although this mystery realm suppressed bright world realm and profound underworld realm cultivators, who knew if it could suppress Genesis realm cultivators? Morong-Yu's heart also moved, but he didn't stop. Instead, he increased his speed and continued to fly forward. He was also very curious about this mystery realm, because apart from the fact that his divine sense couldn't extend very far, his power didn't have any restrictions at all, just like it was outside. It's best that those Genesis realm cultivators also have their power suppressed. That way, I can cross 2 major realms to kill enemies. Morong-Yu's eyes flashed with a terrifying cold light. He was really afraid of the strength of a Genesis realm cultivator. The difference between the 2 sides was too great, and he couldn't resist at all. Whoosh! Just as Morong-Yu was flying, a group of people had already leaped into the mystery realm. From the aura they exuded, they were the bandits that were chasing after Morong-Yu. Genesis realm cultivators. At this moment, the Genesis realm cultivator's expression was dark. He couldn't even catch a small, bright world realm cultivator. Once this matter spread, he wouldn't have the face to see anyone. With a thought, he was about to soar into the air and continue chasing after Morong-Yu. However, he discovered that he couldn't fly. It was as if this mystery realm prohibited flying. No matter how he tried, he couldn't fly. His divine sense was also crazily suppressed to a ferocious level. If he were to rely on his current spiritual sense to track down Morong-Yu, it would be impossible. The most ferocious thing was the suppression of his power by this mystic realm. His power had been suppressed to the netherworld insight realm. Moreover, it was a half-crippled netherworld insight realm without any divine will and the ability to fly. My power has been suppressed to the netherworld stage. The other 2 had looks of shock on their faces. We've all been suppressed by a major realm, but Zhu Xiaoning and the others have been suppressed even more severely. The gap between them and us is still huge. The leader of the group, the creation realm elite who had stretched out his hand to grab Morong-Yu, said in a deep voice. Then, he took a step forward and dashed out. Although they couldn't fly, the walking speed of insight realm cultivators was still terrifying. This way, said Zhu Xiaoning, who was in Morong-Yu's arms, constantly pointing the way for Morong-Yu. On the other hand, Morong-Yu was also flying at high speed without any distracting thoughts. Not long after, a huge, smooth rock that looked like a pillar supporting the heavens appeared in Morong-Yu's line of sight. The huge rock was about 5 kilometers in size. It was perfectly straight and smooth, and it pierced straight into the clouds. However, this wasn't the most shocking thing. The most shocking thing was that this huge rock was surrounded by a bottomless abyss. The place where Morong-Yu stood was at least 10 million kilometers away from the huge rock. If one couldn't fly, then even a netherworld insight realm elite wouldn't be able to jump to the huge rock, right? Moreover, even if one jumped to the side of the rock was so smooth that there was no foothold at all. And if one didn't have a foothold, then they would immediately fall. Who knew how deep it was? If it was too deep, then even a netherworld insight realm elite would be smashed to pieces. Along the huge rock, Morong-Yu looked up. The more he looked, the stranger his expression became. Meanwhile, Zhu Xiaoning's face was a bit red. Nature is truly mysterious. Why does this thing look so much like a man's penis? Morong-Yu couldn't help but sigh. From afar, the huge rock looked like a gigantic penis. No wonder Zhu Xiaoning's face was so red. Let's fly up there. If those Genesis realm elites can't fly, then they shouldn't be able to do anything to us, Zhu Xiaoning said hesitantly. Morong-Yu looked at Zhu Xiaoning with a strange smile. You really want to go up there? Zhu Xiaoning's expression was a bit awkward. After all, that huge rock was too similar to a man's penis. She would be a bit embarrassed to go up there. But now that they were being hunted down by Genesis realm elites, no matter how embarrassed they could only go up there. Was there any other choice? Thus, she nodded. Morong-Yu didn't say anything. He carried Zhu Xiaoning and soared into the sky, quickly flying up. Although this huge rock looked like a man's penis, it wasn't real. So what was there to be embarrassed about? Without any resistance, Morong-Yu still flew for an hour before finally reaching the top. The top was much larger than the bottom, about a dozen miles in radius. The most amazing thing was that there was a spring about a mile wide at the center of the huge rock. Milky white water continuously flowed out of the spring like a hot spring, giving off steam. That spring, that milky white thing, it really looked like a certain thing. Zhu Xiaoning's face flushed red. However, at this moment, there was a plop. Morongyu had already jumped down. Zhu Xiaoning, what are you still standing there for? Why aren't you coming down? Morongyu didn't just jump down himself. He even called for Zhu Xiaoning to jump down. Zhu Xiaoning shook her head shyly. She wouldn't go down no matter what. It was really too awkward. These things can nourish one's skin and temper one's body. They're good stuff. Don't regret it, Morongyu said loudly. As he spoke, he had already sat down cross-legged in the spring, looking like he was cultivating. Zhu Xiaoning still shook her head. She wouldn't go down even if she was beaten to death. Moreover, if she went down, she would be in the same pool as Morongyu. Men and women were different, so how could she not feel embarrassed? Morongyu shook his head. Since Zhu Xiaoning wasn't willing, he couldn't be bothered to persuade her. He could enjoy it all by himself. This milky white thing was actually similar to the Chaos Origin liquid, but it probably couldn't compare. However, its ability to temper one's body was also very good. After a frenzied devouring, Morongyu's body had already been replenished by the Genesis Realm expert's palm strike. Moreover, his body had already reached the peak of the early stage of the Bright World Realm. All of a sudden, ripples appeared in the milky white spring water that was originally calm. Zhu Xiaoning, who was watching Morongyu from outside the spring, clearly saw a black light sweep past Morongyu's body. At the same time, an aura that was much stronger than before emanated from Morongyu's body, disappearing in a flash. Did his body break through? Zhu Xiaoning muttered in her heart. Then, she looked to the other side. In the distance below the huge rock, there were 3 figures standing at the edge of the cliff, looking in their direction. When Zhu Xiaoning looked over, the 2 sides' gazes just happened to meet. Zhu Xiaoning's heart skipped a beat, because she could clearly feel the familiar auras emanating from those 3 people. Weren't they the Genesis Realm bandits who were chasing after them? However, at this moment, these people were only emitting Insight Realm auras. Their cultivation levels should have been suppressed. However, Zhu Xiaoning's heart was still in her throat, and she couldn't relax. Although she saw those people walking over, who knew if they could fly or not. Was there a way to charge up? How did they get to the top of that huge rock? Seeing Zhu Xiaoning above the huge rock, the 3 Genesis Realm bandits were instantly flustered. Unless they can fly, they definitely can't go up. Or there's a teleportation formation nearby that leads to the top. And it must be a teleportation formation. Otherwise, why would they be able to fly? A Genesis Realm expert nodded. Then, the 3 of them split up and began to search for the so-called teleportation formation. Zhu Xiaoning looked at the 3 Genesis Realm experts with a flustered expression, not knowing what they were going to do. However, she knew that these people wouldn't be able to fly up in a short period of time. On the other side, Morongyu's body had already broken through, reaching the middle stage of the Bright World Realm, and his strength had soared again. However, he was still a long way from his goal. His goal was the peak of the Bright World Realm. Thus, he continued to absorb the milky white spring water. Under his crazy devouring, the milky white spring water gradually turned into clear water. When the spring water completely turned into clear water, Morongyu's body had also broken through to the late stage of the Bright World Realm. Now, he could already absorb the power of the Star Core to break through to the Creation Realm. Just as Morongyu was about to enter the Hichu Luo Shu to break through to the next realm, his heart was suddenly enveloped by an extremely strong aura of danger. When Morongyu reacted, he saw a giant axe descending from the sky, splitting the sky as if it was going to split the world apart. Where did this baddie come from? How dare you steal this beauty's treasure? You must be tired of living. At this moment, a clear voice sounded. Hearing that slightly familiar voice, Morongyu was slightly stunned. That voice had a familiar feeling. However, why would he meet someone familiar in this mystic realm? He must have heard wrongly. Thus, he attacked, throwing a punch at the giant axe descending from the sky. However, when he saw the axe, he was stunned again. This axe also gave off a familiar feeling. Out of the blue, Moronyu abruptly withdrew his attack. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared from where he stood. At this moment, a figure had also broken through the sky and rushed out from the void. It was a petite figure, about 13 or 14 years old. However, although this person was very different from one of Morongyu's old friends, the shape of her face was still 70% similar. Little lowly? Morongyu shouted hesitantly. Who dares to call this beauty a little lowly? The other party seemed to be very angry. However, she quickly threw away the giant axe in her hand, then jumped toward Morongyu. Oh, so it's you, baddie. I missed you so much. Before he could finish his sentence, Morongyu felt a fragrant wind blow against his face. Following that, a petite and soft body crashed into his embrace. Chapter 2034. Pop, pop, pop. Morongyu's face and even his lips were kissed a few times by the figure in his arms. This made him blush. It was fine if it was his face, but his lips were not something that ordinary people could kiss. And the person who kissed him was Little Lowly. The Little Lowly, also known as Rune, was the one who carried a giant axe and always boasted about herself. Unparalleled beauty in the heavens and the earth. The moon shamed, the flowers shamed, and the fishes and geese alighted. When they were in the holy world, she mysteriously appeared and got to know Morongyu. Then, she suddenly disappeared. At that time, Morongyu suspected that she was a descendant of some supreme being's daughter. But after he took control of the holy world, he did not find Little Lowly. At that time, he suspected that Little Lowly was someone from outside the holy world. Sure enough, Little Lowly was really someone from outside, and they met in this secret realm. However, after not seeing her for a while, Little Lowly, who had never grown up, had actually grown up. She had changed from the 7 or 8 years old girl to the 13 or 14 years old girl who had started to have curves. However, although Little Lowly had grown up, she was still so beautiful and cute. Most importantly, she was still so cute, and the way she appeared was still so explosive. Before she even appeared, she chopped down with an axe. Big baddie, where did you run off to? Later, I went to the holy world to find you, but you were already gone. At that time, I thought you were already dead, causing me to be sad for nothing for a day. Because Morongyu used his hand to cover her face, not allowing her to continue kissing. Her words were a little vague. Morongyu rolled his eyes. I died, and you were sad for a day? You still miss me like this? What else do you want? This beauty is very busy. How can I have the time to be sad? Oh, right, you have already reached the peak of the bright world realm, and your strength is about the same as mine. How depressing. Who is she? Seeing Little Lowly kissing Morongyu madly, Zhu Xiaoning, who was at the side, was already in a mess. At this moment, she finally came to her senses and asked. The sudden appearance of the Little Lowly and the fact that she could fly shocked her. This beauty is the unparalleled beauty of the heavens and the earth. The moon shames, the flower shames, and the fishes and geese fall from grace. Ayun, little girl, who are you? Could it be that you're also a girl who was tricked into bed by a big bad guy? The Little Lowly first praised herself. Then, she looked at Zhu Xiaoning suspiciously and said something that left Morongyu and Zhu Xiaoning speechless. That's not right. You look like a virgin. Don't be fooled by this big bad guy. Don't be fooled by his honest and considerate appearance. In fact, he's a bad guy. He already has several wives and a lot of grandchildren. He still goes around cheating little girls. Morongyu's face darkened as he pulled the Little Lowly out of his arms. He was too lazy to argue with the Little Lowly. Moreover, he didn't have any special feelings for Zhu Xiaoning. On the contrary, he was rather interested in the Little Lowly's background. Big bad guy, why don't I see Big Sister Jiqing, Big Sister Mengqing, and the others? Did you abandon them? The Little Lowly waved her giant axe and looked at Morongyu with murderous intent. As long as Morongyu nodded or said yes, she would kill Morongyu with her axe. Morongyu glared at her, Children shouldn't ask about adult matters. You, on the other hand, why are you here? This is my place. I can come and go as I please. The little lowly proudly raised her little head, looking very pleased with herself. Your place? Morong muttered. If this secret realm really was the little lowly's place, then who was she? However, no matter who the other party was, they wouldn't do anything to harm him. What he was thinking about now was how to use the little lowly to shake off the bandits chasing after them. You mean those 3 big bad guys? The little lowly's eyes turned, then she smiled. Seeing the little lowly's appearance, Morong knew that this little girl was up to something again. I make the decisions in my place. This secret realm isn't a place you can come and go as you please. The little lowly smiled, her eyes flashing with a cold light. Seeing this, Morong couldn't help but observe a moment of silence for the 3 bandits. Although the little lowly still had the temperament of a child, she had lived much longer than Morong. Moreover, her background was terrifying. Thus, when she messed with people, she was absolutely terrifying. They are Genesis realm existences. Zhu Xiaoning couldn't help but say worriedly, even if heaven realm experts come, as long as I don't want them to, they won't be able to leave. The little lowly patted her already developing chest. However, her words stunned Morong and Zhu Xiaoning. Zhu Xiaoning, in particular, was given a fright. She didn't even care about heaven realm cultivators. Who exactly was the little lowly? There was at least a supreme existence that surpassed heaven realm behind her. This background was really too terrifying. Come with me. After saying this, the little lowly carried the giant axe and flew up first. Meanwhile, Morong hugged Zhu Xiaoning again and flew down with the little lowly. Thus, at the same time, the 3 Genesis realm experts below also discovered Morong and the others, and thus used their speed to chase after them. Zhu Xiaoning, give up. You can't escape, a Genesis realm expert said in a low voice. At this moment, seeing that Morong and the little lowly could fly, they were no longer shocked, because they had already guessed this. Also, brat, I've already sent out your image. If you give up on escaping and hand Zhu Xiaoning over to us, the matter between you and our skeleton bandits will be written off. Otherwise, you'll face the relentless pursuit of our skeleton bandits. Another Genesis realm expert threatened Morong. F*CKU. Morong gritted his teeth. These bandits were really shameless. However, if the skeleton bandits wanted to kill him, it would really be troublesome. However, even if he handed over Zhu Xiaoning, they wouldn't let him go. Thus, he could only fight the skeleton bandits to the end. Isn't it just a trash skeleton bandits? One day, I'll erase all of you from the starry skies. Morong retorted. Trash bandits. Zhu Xiaoning was once again thrown into disarray. The skeleton bandits were one of the top forces in the Milky Way star field, and they even had peak Genesis realm experts overseeing them. With this kind of strength, Morong wanted to erase them? Now, it looked like this was practically a fantasy. Sure enough, the 3 bandits were directly enraged because of Morong's arrogant words. However, just as they were about to speak, the world suddenly changed. Rumble. After a series of earth-shattering booms, the 3 Genesis realm bandits discovered that they couldn't see each other, nor could they see Morong's group of 3. All they saw was a dense fog and terrifying killing intent. They had entered the spell formation. Morong's group of 3 stopped. Ha ha, Genesis realm experts? They're going to die soon. The little lowly laughed loudly like a little demon. Ah. Not long after, 3 incomparably shrill cries of agony rang out. Then, after the cries of agony disappeared, those spell formations also stopped operating. And then, there was no more and then. There was nothing inside the spell formation. Even those origin tools and the like were not left behind. They were really all dead. This spell formation, even a peak Genesis realm expert would die without leaving even a trace behind, right? Zhu Xiaoning was extremely shocked. This was because only 15 minutes had passed from the moment those 3 bandits entered the spell formation to the moment they died. Thinking of this, Zhu Xiaoning felt a wave of lingering fear. Fortunately, they hadn't gone too deep back then. Otherwise, they would have been wiped out long ago. I'm the master of my mystic realm. So, Big Baddie, if you encounter something you can't solve in the future, you can hide here. This beauty will help you solve it. However, it's a pity that you can't control this mystic realm. Otherwise, I'll let you control it. The little loli was all smiles, but every word she said deeply stunned Zhu Xiaoning. As for Moronyu, he had long since gotten used to it. No matter how heaven-defying the little loli's performance was, he would not be shocked again. Soon, everyone followed the little loli to the back of the mystic realm. During this process, the little loli removed the mystic realm suppression on Zhu Xiaoning, allowing her to regain the ability to fly. The little loli lived in a peach blossom garden. Zhu Xiaoning fell in love with this place at first sight. Meanwhile, Moronyu didn't stay here for long. Instead, he entered the Hichu Luo Shu. Now that everything was ready, he could break through. After all, his enemies were getting stronger and stronger. If he was still at the Bright World realm, he would be killed sooner or later. After stabilizing his cultivation, Moronyu took out the complete star core. Not only did the star core contain terrifying power, but also contained all kinds of comprehension from birth to destruction. And the creation realm was the creation realm. Therefore, this kind of comprehension was needed. In fact, Moronyu had already comprehended a few things earlier. Now, he was just one step away. Therefore, he held the star core with both hands and began to cultivate. He used his spiritual force to probe in and connect with the power within the star core. He comprehended the various comprehensions and comprehensions left in the star core. However, Moronyu didn't absorb the power of the star core. Before he had enough comprehension, no matter how much power he absorbed, he wouldn't be able to break through. In the end, it would only cause his body and soul to explode. This wasn't the case for Moronyu, but for all cultivators. This was equivalent to the heavenly tribulation in the past. If one couldn't survive the heavenly tribulation, they wouldn't be able to reach a new realm. What Moronyu needed to do was to obtain enough comprehension, then absorb the power of the star core, and rush to the creation realm in one go. Time passed. Moronyu was cultivating, and Zhu Xiaoning and the little loli were already in a heated battle. Meanwhile, the creation realm experts of the Skeleton Bandits and the Milky Way auction house had already gathered in the solar system. A great battle was about to break out. Chapter 2035. Because of Zhu Xiaoning, the Milky Way auction house already knew that the Skeleton Bandits had attacked them. And for the inheritance of the peak celestial realm, their identities had been exposed. Therefore, the Skeleton Bandits didn't back down, but openly competed with the Milky Way auction house. However, because the inheritance of the peak celestial realm was of great importance, although the expert from both sides kept pouring into the solar system, they tacitly didn't leak the news. Otherwise, in the end, it wouldn't just be the two of them competing, but more forces. Even the celestial realm forces in the Milky Way star field would be involved. Once this happened, whether it was the Milky Way auction house or the Skeleton Bandits, they might just be helping others. However, a large number of Genesis realm experts from both sides poured into the solar system, which naturally attracted the attention of some forces. The first to notice was the Lin family. Originally, the Lin family already had experts in the solar system, so they were naturally very sensitive to the experts from outside. In fact, in a small place like the solar system, even a Genesis realm expert would make the people here feel something. Not to mention a large number of Genesis realm experts pouring in. Even if these Genesis realm experts didn't have a powerful aura, the aura they vaguely emitted was still very powerful after gathering in space, intimidating all the cultivators in the solar system. At first, the Lin family thought that some treasure would appear in the solar system. Therefore, a large number of Netherworld realm experts poured in. However, after a few days, the Lin family quickly retreated from the solar system like birds startled by the twang of a bow. It couldn't be helped. Even if the ancestor of the Lin family came personally, he would be scared ***. This was because they realized that there were too many Genesis realm experts in the solar system. For existences of this level, even if they poked over with a finger, the entire Lin family would be annihilated. Naturally, after the Lin family left, the investigation of Murong-Yu was also suspended. This was good news for Murong-Yu. However, a large number of experts poured in. If they fought here, the aftermath of the overflowing power could blow up the entire solar system. At that time, the Holy World naturally wouldn't be spared. However, Murong-Yu didn't know all of this yet. He was now at the critical moment of breaking through. As expected of something that even Netherworld Insight Realm cultivators and even Genesis Realm cultivators would covet. The amount of information contained in it was simply too much. When Murong-Yu comprehended the various epiphanies, he did not feel like he had gained an epiphany. Instead, he felt as if they had been directly imbued into him. It allowed Murong-Yu's understanding of souls in Blessed Realm to rapidly increase with every passing moment. On this day, Murong-Yu felt that he had comprehended enough. Thus, he began to absorb the power of the stellar core. An enormous amount of energy surged into Murong-Yu's body, rapidly increasing his strength and the level of his body. In fact, even his soul was slowly improving. It was an improvement in 3 aspects at the same time. However, the result of this was that Murong-Yu was unable to break through to the Blessed Realm within a short period of time. However, Murong-Yu was very safe now, so he was not in a hurry. As time passed, the Milky Way auction house and the skeleton bandits finally clashed. The skeleton bandits were the ones who started it. When the skeleton bandits discovered that the 3 Genesis Realm cultivators who had chased after Murong-Yu and his companion had died, they thought that it was the Milky Way auction house's doing. Thus, they attacked and killed 2 Genesis Realm cultivators from the Milky Way auction house. The Milky Way auction house was naturally enraged and retaliated strongly. Things went out of control just like that. The cultivators from both sides clashed head-on, and a huge battle erupted in the solar system. Because the solar system was just a small, remote galaxy, the level of the cultivators here was not very high. Thus, the void here was on the weaker side. Terrifying power erupted, engulfing many planets and origin planets. The starry sky was constantly annihilated. A terrifying aura enveloped the entire solar system. Many cultivators in the solar system thought that it was the end of the world, and they were terrified all day long. Meanwhile, Genesis Realm cultivators from the Milky Way auction house and the skeleton bandits kept dying. As for the Netherworld Insight Realm cultivators, even more of them died. However, both sides were in a frenzy. The inheritance of a peak Heaven Realm cultivator was worth it for them to go crazy over. As long as they could obtain the inheritance, even if their forces were wiped out, it would be worth it. Because as long as they reached the Heaven Realm, they could establish a force that was thousands of times stronger than their current force. During this process, both sides finally entered the Mystic Realm. This Mystic Realm was not cut off from the outside world. Thus, Zhu Xiaoning's information could also be transmitted out. Thus, the Milky Way auction house knew how terrifying the Mystic Realm was. Originally, the Milky Way auction house did not intend to enter the Mystic Realm, because Zhu Xiaoning was safe enough in the Mystic Realm. Zhu Xiaoning did not reveal anything about little Lolita. Little Lolita's background was too terrifying, and Zhu Xiaoning was worried that if the Milky Way auction house knew too much, it would make little Lolita unhappy. If that happened, the Milky Way auction house would be in trouble. However, after seeing the skeleton bandits enter the Mystic Realm in large numbers, the Milky Way auction house could not hold back anymore. Although Zhu Xiaoning said that she was absolutely safe in the Mystic Realm, they were still worried. What if the Heaven Realm inheritance was snatched away? Thus, the cultivators from both sides entered the Mystic Realm in large numbers. At this time, the cultivators from many forces came over. After seeing both sides enter the Mystic Realm, they all thought that the battle between both sides was because of this Mystic Realm. Thus, more people entered the Mystic Realm. The battle in the solar system finally stopped, and the cultivators in the solar system could finally heave a sigh of relief. The terrifying aura that rippled between heaven and earth suppressed them so much that they almost could not breathe. In the mystic realm, regardless of whether it was the skeleton bandits, the Milky Way auction house, or the cultivators from other forces, they all had gloomy expressions. This was because their realms had been suppressed to the netherworld realm, and they could not use their divine telekinesis, let alone fly. The most terrifying thing was that there were too many traps and arrays in this mystic realm. On the first day of entering the mystic realm, many people from all sides had died, especially the skeleton bandits and the Milky Way auction house, who had the most people, had suffered heavy losses. Moreover, there were no treasures in this mystic realm at all. Regarding this, Zhu Xiaoning was secretly anxious, but there was nothing she could do. Buzz, just as the skeleton bandits and the Milky Way auction house were entering the mystic realm, suddenly, the mystic realm's heaven and earth trembled, and then a powerful aura was released. It disappeared in a flash. Everyone who entered the mystic realm knew what this was. Someone had broken through to the next realm, and it was only the creation realm. This made them feel strange. Someone breaking through to the creation realm actually caused the heaven and earth here to resonate. Was a creation realm cultivator so awesome? Creation realm, I've finally broken through. At the back of the mystic realm, in the Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu could feel that his power was billions of times stronger than before, and he could not help but laugh loudly. Cultivation, creation realm. Physical body, creation realm. Soul, creation realm. He had broken through in all three aspects and reached the first stage of the creation realm. And the price of all this was that the entire star core had been completely devoured by Murong Yu. In other words, if Murong Yu wanted to continue to improve, he would have to continue to find things that contained a huge amount of power to absorb. However, after this comprehensive breakthrough, Murong Yu's strength had skyrocketed, and he was now comparable to a netherworld realm cultivator. Even if he had absorbed 2 star cores, Murong Yu felt that it was worth it, not to mention 1 star core. The power of the 9 syllables mantra was becoming more and more terrifying. Murong Yu gave it a try. A casual word from him was enough to instantly kill a first-level profound underworld realm existence. If he used all 9 words, even a level 2 netherworld realm cultivator would not be able to withstand it. The power of the weapon fragments was becoming more and more terrifying. With his soul and physical body, Murong Yu felt that it would not be a problem to kill a level 3 netherworld realm cultivator. This was the terrifying power of the creation realm. In the endless starry sky, the rebirth realm, chaos realm, and bright world realm cultivators were at the bottom. They were not strong, and their status was not high. Moreover, the cultivators of these 3 realms were the most common in the endless starry sky. However, once they reached the creation realm, their strength and status would rise directly. In the solar system, as long as one reached the creation realm, one would be an elder. Even in the Milky Way star sector, which was more powerful, creation realm cultivators began to have some status. They were not small fry like the rebirth realm, chaos realm, and bright world realm cultivators. In the endless starry sky, creation realm cultivators should be considered mid-level existences, right? Creation realm, divine dragon, come out. After breaking through, Murong Yu could already create things. Therefore, with a thought, he shouted, and a lifelike divine dragon appeared in front of him. Murong Yu looked over and realized that the divine dragon he created was no different from a real divine dragon in terms of essence, chi, and spirit, flesh, and bones. It even had a soul. This was simply a real divine dragon. However, this divine dragon was connected to Murong Yu's chi and blood. It was as if it was a part of Murong Yu's body. However, Murong Yu also realized that this divine dragon's strength was not at the rebirth realm yet. Increase my power, Murong Yu shouted in his heart. Then, power surged into the divine dragon's body like stormy waves. Under the infusion of Murong Yu's power, The Divine Dragon's realm increased rapidly. Rebirth realm, Chaos realm, Bright World realm, Peak Bright World realm. Creation realm, Peak Creation realm. When the Divine Dragon's realm increased to the peak of the Creation realm, it could no longer increase its realm. It could only create creatures that were one realm higher in combat power. Murong-Yu stopped instilling power into the Divine Dragon. Then, he carefully sized up the Divine Dragon. He realized that this Divine Dragon was not only identical to a real one, but it also had its own consciousness. Most importantly, this Divine Dragon's intelligence was not low. It was almost the same as his. If he could create one or more Divine Dragons or other creatures during the war, wouldn't it be of great help? Why didn't those Creation Realm cultivators use this? Murong-Yu was full of doubts. With a thought, another creature appeared in front of him, the vermilion bird. Chapter 2036. After the vermilion bird appeared, its realm quickly rose to the peak of the Creation realm. Then, a white tiger appeared as well. After the white tiger was a black tortoise. Finally, a Qilin appeared in front of Murong-Yu. 5 sacred beasts, and all of them were at the peak of the Creation realm. At this moment, the 5 sacred beasts were all standing in front of Murong-Yu, and they were all extremely docile. Looking at the 5 sacred beasts, Murong-Yu could feel that his qi and blood were connected to them, as if they had been separated from his body. However, they did not seem to be his clones. They did not seem to be the embodiment of power, nor did they seem to be his son or daughter. They were like loyal servants, listening to Murong-Yu's words. However, they had their own ideas and were extremely intelligent. In fact, these 5 sacred beasts even had all of Murong-Yu's skills and could use Murong-Yu's cultivation methods. Because of their high intelligence, they knew how to fight. Creating such a creature would definitely be beneficial to the battle and would not be detrimental. However, he had never seen any Creation Realm powerhouse do so. Murong-Yu found Elder Duan Han, who was cultivating in Hichu Luoshu, and asked in confusion, "Master, let me ask you a question. Can you create things in battle?" Elder Duan Han looked at Murong-Yu in confusion. "Haven't you already broken through to the next realm? Won't you know if you create a creature to take a look? I've already created 5 powerful creatures at the same time, but I don't feel anything wrong." Murong-Yu asked in confusion. Puffed. Elder Duan Han spat out a mouthful of blood. Creating 5 creatures at the same time? Wasn't this too crazy? Perhaps Murong-Yu had not grasped the true ability to create things yet. Therefore, the creatures he created should not be high level. Otherwise, how could he create multiple creatures at the same time? Elder Duan Han pondered in his heart. However, at this moment, the 5 sacred beasts appeared in front of him. "Master, these are the 5 creatures I created. What do you think?" Elder Duan Han staggered and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He was provoked by Murong-Yu. Did this guy really just break through? How could they create creatures like this? Elder Duan Han didn't even know how to describe the 5 sacred beasts. Because even with his strength, it was impossible to create a creature with such high intelligence, let alone 5 at the same time. Murong-Yu is a soul cultivator. His soul is stronger, so he should have more essence blood. It's normal for him to be a little more abnormal. Elder Broken Soul muttered to himself. "Master, what's going on?" Murong-Yu looked uneasily at Elder Duan Han, whose expression kept changing. He thought that something had gone wrong with his creation. Elder Duan Han looked at Murong-Yu as if he was looking at a freak and explained, "In addition to consuming a large amount of energy, creation also requires a large amount of soul power and blood essence." Murong-Yu nodded. "So that's how it is." As he spoke, he also checked the soul and blood essence. He didn't consume much of his soul energy, because he had too much soul energy. Not to mention 5 saint beasts, even 500 million saint beasts wouldn't be a problem. However, he consumed a lot of blood essence. One creature consumed a drop of his blood essence. However, he had a lot of blood essence too, at least 10,000 drops. Theoretically, he could create 10,000 saint beasts at the same time. Moreover, because of the tree of life, the blood essence that he consumed could be regenerated quickly. In other words, theoretically, Muronyu could even create an army of creatures. An army of creatures that was limited by countless words. If that was the case, it would be a tragedy to be Murongyu's enemy. Muronyu didn't even have to do anything. His army of creatures could trample the other party to death. As for the consumption of energy with the Tree of Life, it wasn't a problem at all. Ha. Muronyu laughed in his heart. His realm was still low, so he could only create creatures at the peak of the creation realm. If he continued to break through one or two small realms, he could create creatures at the enlightenment realm, right? By then, how could the Lin family be his opponent? He could wipe out the Lin family directly. I'm going to cultivate. Elder Duan Han was dealt a huge blow. He waved his hand and left. If he continued to stay with Muronyu, this pervert, he would even have the thought of committing suicide. I wonder what my limit is now. Muronyu was a little impulsive. He wanted to see how many creatures he could create. However, in the end, he stopped this boring thought. You guys stay here and cultivate. I'm leaving, Muronyu said to the 5 saint beasts. He didn't care if they could cultivate or not, and left Hichu Luoshu. What Muronyu didn't know was that after he left, the 5 saint beasts actually sat down cross-legged and started cultivating. If Elder Duan Hun saw this, he would probably vomit blood again. Batty, you're out? You actually broke through. I can't defeat you again. How depressing. Little Loli was very happy when she saw Muronyu. However, when she saw that Muronyu had broken through, she became depressed. Murongyu's eyes lit up. They hadn't even fought yet, and little Loli already knew that she wasn't his opponent. Isn't this too amazing? However, Muronyu didn't dwell on this matter. Instead, he first received information from his avatar and Dongfang Lang. If these people continue to stay in the solar system, they will only cause unrest in the solar system. It's time for them to leave the solar system. Muronyu muttered to himself as he looked at Zhu Xiaoning and little Loli. Zhu Xiaoning, I'll send you back to your people now. Otherwise, it's not a good idea to stay here forever. Zhu Xiaoning nodded. The Milky Way auction house had lost too much in the past few days. If this continued, the strength of the Milky Way auction house would definitely be greatly weakened. Moreover, she still had to go back to the Milky Way auction house. In fact, she had this idea for a long time. However, Muronyu was breaking through these few days, and little Loli didn't have time to send her back. As for her alone, she wasn't that demonisy Yulan who could leave without saying goodbye. Immediately, the 3 of them rose into the air and flew toward the powerhouses of the Milky Way auction house, according to the direction little Loli had given them. Boom! Not long after, a huge fist rose from the ground and blasted towards Zhu Xiaoning. This was a Genesis realm powerhouse from the Skeleton Bandits. Unfortunately, under the suppression of the Mystic Realm, he only had the strength of the Netherworld Realm. However, the strength of a peak Netherworld Realm powerhouse wasn't something Muronyu and the other 2 could contend against. However, it was impossible for him to kill Muronyu and the other 2. This was because the 3 of them could fly, but the other party couldn't. Muronyu and the other 2 only flew a short distance upward and avoided the other party's attack. This made the bandit roar in anger. Muronyu's face was full of displeasure. If the creature he created could reach the Netherworld Realm, he would definitely rush down and fight with the other party. He might even be able to kill a Genesis Realm powerhouse whose strength was suppressed by the suppression of numbers. However, it was better to forget about it now. If he rushed down, he would be courting death. The bandit roared and chased after them on the ground. However, not long after, little Loli activated a trap and killed him. This was little Loli's territory. Offending her was no different from seeking death. After half a day, Muronyu finally arrived at the place where the powerhouses of the Milky Way auction house were gathered. Because they had already received Zhu Xiaoning's message. When Muronyu arrived, most of the powerhouses of the Milky Way auction house had already gathered. Muronyu, thank you. A middle-aged man looked at Zhu Xiaoning and heaved a sigh of relief. Then, He strode forward and handed Murong-Yu a purple token. This is the highest level VIP card of the Milky Way Auction House. All purchases at the Milky Way Auction House will be 30% off. Also, Murong-Yu, you will always be a friend of the Milky Way Auction House. Murong-Yu did not stand on ceremony and directly took the VIP card. It would be a waste not to take advantage of such benefits. However, Murong-Yu hoped that the other party had given him origin crystals, because he was now completely clean. He could not even activate Hichu Luoshu's time acceleration function. Brat, this space treasure is for you. Remember to look for me when you come to the Milky Way star sector in the future. Before leaving, Zhu Xiaoning threw a space treasure to Murong-Yu. Then, she reluctantly followed the powerhouses of the Milky Way auction house and quickly left. She knew that Murong-Yu would still leave the solar system, but he would definitely not follow them on the road. Murong-Yu was afraid of them. If he met someone who wanted to rob him on the road, thinking about how he had almost been killed by a Genesis Realm powerhouse, he had a lingering fear. It was better to go on the road by himself. Big baddie, Sister Xiaoning clearly likes you. Let me see what's inside. It can't be a token of your love, right? The little lowly snatched the space treasure from Murong-Yu's hands and used her divine sense to explore it. Murong-Yu smiled bitterly. He already had 5 wives. Even these 5 wives did not have much time to accompany them. How could he continue? He did not have any thoughts about this at all. It's just some high-grade origin crystals. I knew he was such a vulgar person. The little lowly said with some disdain and threw the space treasure to Murong-Yu. Murong-Yu rolled his eyes. Although he knew that there were high-grade origin crystals inside, he still could not help but explore it with his divine sense. 10 billion. Murong-Yu's heart trembled. This was the first time Murong-Yu had seen so many high-grade origin crystals. Obviously, Zhu Xiaoning had asked the people of the Milky Way auction house for this. This woman knew what Murong-Yu lacked and what he did not lack. Too considerate. This kind of person was suitable to be a wife. However, Murong-Yu shook his head. He no longer had any thoughts about this. Little lowly, you can play here by yourself. Big brother is leaving. After putting the space treasure into the Hichu Luoshu, Murong-Yu also prepared to leave. However, before he could leave, he was grabbed by the little lowly. Where are you going? Anyway, I'm already tired of playing here. Also, it seems that following you is quite fun. Therefore, I've decided to follow you to explore the world. Chapter 2037. As a result, Murong-Yu had another little lowly by his side. Murong-Yu was helpless about this. He didn't want to bring the little lowly everywhere. After all, it would be inconvenient to have someone by his side. Of course, Murong-Yu was very confident in the little lowly's safety. The little lowly's background was too terrifying. Even if the little lowly stood there and was killed, the one who would die would not be her, but the person who killed her. With the little lowly by his side, Murong-Yu would have an invisible protective umbrella. However, Murong-Yu didn't need these protective umbrellas. Cultivators who lived under protective umbrellas were like flowers in a greenhouse. They couldn't withstand the wind and rain at all. Murong-Yu came out to improve his strength, not to seek protection. However, the little lowly was like a shameless person. After clinging to Murong-Yu, he couldn't get rid of her. As a result, Murong-Yu brought her along no matter how helpless he was. When Zhu Xiaoning left, apart from giving Murong-Yu 10 billion high-grade crystals, she also gave Murong-Yu the location of the teleportation array to leave the solar system. These teleportation arrays were all in good condition and there was no danger. With enough crystals, Murong-Yu left the solar system in less than half a month and appeared in a star system, the Tiger Claw star system. The Milky Way star field wasn't a special place. It was just a general term, like a country. The entire star field was made up of countless star systems. The solar system and the Tiger Claw star system were both part of the Milky Way star field. In the Milky Way star field, there were 10 star systems that were the most powerful and had the widest starry skies. There were the Dark Wind star system, Sky Crane star system, Wing star system, Destiny star system, Wildfire star system, Qingxia star system, benevolent star system, true dragon star system, Tianshan star system, and Tianhu star system. These 10 galaxies were the 10 most powerful celestial realm warriors of the Milky Way star field resided. They were also their headquarters. They were the most powerful galaxies in the Milky Way star field, and also the top 10 forces with the highest average strength. It could be said that in the Milky Way star field, these 10 star systems had the highest level, the densest heaven and earth yuan qi, the most high-level yuan stars, the most resources, and the most powerful warriors. Of course, this didn't mean that the Milky Way only had these galaxies. In a vast Milky Way, there were as many galaxies as there were grains of sand in the Ganges. However, the other galaxies were inferior to those 10 galaxies in all aspects. For example, in the solar system, even if there was a direct teleportation channel, no one would go there. Why? Because it was too barren. What was the point of going there? In the Milky Way, there were many galaxies like the solar system. Generally speaking, galaxies are also divided into 9 levels. For example, the solar system was a first-rate galaxy. Grade 1 galaxies were naturally the worst, and the top 10 galaxies were naturally the Grade 9 galaxies in the Milky Way star field. This was naturally the information that Zhu Xiaoning gave Murongyu. Otherwise, Murongyu wouldn't know anything about the other galaxies and would look like a country bumpkin. At least, after knowing all this, Murongyu didn't look like a country bumpkin anymore. According to Zhu Xiaoning's information, the Tiger Claw galaxy that Murongyu was in wasn't a high grade one. It was only a grade 4 galaxy. However, compared to the solar system, which was only a grade 1 galaxy, the Tiger Claw galaxy was still relatively high grade. At the very least, the heaven and earth yuan qi of the yuan star that Murongyu appeared in wasn't something that the solar system could compare to. Most importantly, Murongyu's archenemy, the Lin family, was in the Tiger Claw galaxy. After asking around, Murongyu discovered that the Lin family was doing well in the Tiger Claw galaxy. It was said that they were ranked quite high among the factions. Wow, there's a good show to watch. At this moment, Murongyu and the little lowly had already entered a big city. As soon as they entered the city, Murongyu saw a large group of people not far in front of them. They seemed to be looking at something. The little lowly loved to watch a show, so she skipped over. Although she was just a little lowly, the giant axe on her shoulder exuded a threatening, cold light. Thus, wherever she passed, everyone would retreat and make a path for her. This made the little lowly very proud. Murongyu didn't get close. Firstly, he wasn't worried about the little lowly's safety. Secondly, he wasn't interested in knowing what everyone was looking at. Even if he wanted to know, he could just extend his divine sense. Right now, one of his power clones was in the Hichu Luo Shu. Apart from the big black dog, there was also a slave in the Hichu Luo Shu, Rongzhou. As for Elder Duanhun, as soon as they entered the Tiger Claw galaxy, he had already left Murongyu to deal with his matters. It was worth mentioning that Elder Duanhun's strength had already risen to the Netherworld Insight realm after he left. Moreover, Murongyu had also gifted him with large amounts of high-grade origin crystals, sun crystals, and Netherworld Insight realm treasures. Right now, Elder Duanhun could be said to be armed to the teeth. As long as he wasn't unlucky enough to encounter an expert who was much stronger than him and had a conflict with him, he probably wouldn't die so easily. Ever since his soul had broken through, Murongyu began to organize Rongzhua's soul. With Murongyu's breakthrough, his soul was at least 100 times more powerful than before. After half a month of hard work, he had already reorganized 1/10 of her originally chaotic soul. These souls were extracted from the billions of soul fragments by Murongyu, as if they were silk from a cocoon. Then, they were combined into a single piece. In the end, he locked onto it. After locking onto it, these souls wouldn't continue to be chaotic. Thus, Rongzhou could be said to have recovered 1/10 of her soul. However, with Murongyu's current level of soul cultivation, he was still unable to completely recover her soul for now. However, in the process of organizing Rongzhua's soul, Murongyu's comprehension of the soul improved by leaps and bounds. Even without absorbing tremendous amounts of soul energy, his soul had already reached the peak of the first level of the manifestation realm in half a month. As long as he continued like this, his soul would definitely be the first to break through to a higher realm. Muronyu was obviously extremely delighted by this. As a result, he spent all day studying Rong Zhirua's soul. After all, it was best to do more of something that would benefit both sides. Big Baddie Die. Just as Muronyu was concentrating on studying Rong Zhirua's soul, he suddenly heard the little girl's furious bellow. Oh no! Murongyu's expression changed drastically. He knew the little girl's fiery personality. Her bellow was definitely a sign of her wanting to kill someone with an axe. As a result, he took a step forward, pushed aside the crowd, and charged in. However, it was all too late. As soon as Muronyu charged in, he saw a ball of blood-red light shoot up into the sky. Afterwards, Muronyu saw a corpse lying on the ground in two. The soul could not escape at all after being struck by the little girl's axe. Muronyu had seen this many times in the Saint world. In other words, that person had been directly killed by the little girl. Muronyu face-bombed. The little girl really knew how to cause trouble for him. He did not want to be hunted down as soon as he arrived in the Tiger's Claw Galaxy. It's over. She actually killed the city lord's only son. Whose family is this girl from? He's going to be in trouble. The surrounding people quickly retreated with a horrified expression. It didn't take long for all of them to retreat. She was so fast that she really was a cultivator from a fourth-grade galaxy. The city lord's only son. Murongyu's face darkened. He was in big trouble now. Thus, he stretched out his large hand to grab the little lowly and was about to slip away as quickly as possible. However, at this moment, a few terrifying auras charged over from all directions. Muronyu only saw a dozen or so profound underworld realm experts charging at him with murderous intent. In for a penny, in for a pound. These people would definitely not let the two of them go. Since they were about to shed all pretense of cordiality, they might as well make the first move. Who cared if the other party was good or bad, as long as it was an enemy? Murongyu's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he immediately made a move. Zai technique, spatial tier, poo, poo, poo. With Murongyu's current strength, those first and second stage Insight Realm cultivators did not even have time to approach before they were killed by Muronyu in one move. Murongyu's current strength was comparable to a third stage Insight Realm cultivator. He was extremely powerful. Seeing those people charging over, the little girl was not nervous at all. Instead, she was excited. Her personality had not changed at all. However, before she could make a move, those people had been killed by Muronyu. Thus, she was depressed. Big Baddie, you stole my business. Hearing the little girl's words, the surrounding cultivators who had not gone far had black lines on their faces. Stole her business. However, just what were the origins of this big and small pair? They actually dared to kill the city lord's only son? The city lord was a member of the Lin family. In this part of the galaxy ruled by the Lin family, these two people were really daring. Finally, an old cultivator could not stand it anymore and transmitted his voice to Muronyu. Young man, the city lord is a member of the Lin family. You should quickly leave this city. A member of the Lin family? Murongyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Just now, he was afraid that he had killed the wrong person. However, as long as it was a member of the Lin family, he would not kill the wrong person. However, he still thanked the old cultivator. Let's go. After glaring at the little girl, Muronyu grabbed her wrist and was about to soar into the sky and leave this city. However, go? You can't go anywhere. All of you stay here. A thunderous roar rang out. Following that, a gigantic hand smashed through the void and grabbed at Muronyu and Jian Wushuang. Do you think you can stop me if I want to go? Muronyu was full of pride. He took a step forward and soared into the sky. At the same time, he had already launched a fierce punch. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, more than a dozen sword lights slashed through the void, traversed through time and space, and shot towards the little lowly. Murongyu's anger soared to the heavens. These people were too despicable. They actually targeted a little girl instead of him. Chapter 2038. Boom! Murong Yu unleashed all his power, and the powerful aura of a level 3 Insight Realm cultivator was fully exposed. He smashed the huge hand that was descending from the sky with one punch. At the same time, he took another step forward and rushed to the front of the sword light. He attacked with both hands. Streaks of power blasted out like a storm. Soul Storm. Not only was the other party despicable, but he also wanted to kill them. Furthermore, he was from the Lin family. Therefore, Murong Yu didn't hold back in the slightest as he unleashed his most violent attack. Didn't they want to kill them? Then let's kill our way out. Bang! 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 Murong Yu's soul attack had already reached the peak of a level 1 Bright World Realm cultivator. He was only half a step away from breaking through. Thus, after he used it, the souls of the surrounding people trembled. Murong Yu's opponents didn't even have time to react before they were slashed into the soul space by Murong Yu's soul attack. Poof! A low-level Insight Realm cultivator didn't even have time to react before his vision turned black. Then he lost consciousness. His soul had been slashed into pieces by Murong Yu. Soul cultivators originally had the terrifying battle power to kill enemies that were a whole realm higher. In addition, Murong Yu's cultivation wasn't weak either. Because of this, no one under the 3rd level of the Netherworld realm could withstand Murong Yu's attack. Hiss, seeing the expert besieging Murong Yu instantly killed, the surrounding people couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air. No matter how they looked at it, Murong Yu was just a creation realm cultivator. Since when was a creation realm cultivator so terrifying? Killing an Insight Realm cultivator was like killing a chicken. Truly terrifying. Let's go. Murong Yu pulled the little lowly and was about to leave this place quickly. The overall strength of this city wasn't very strong. However, this was the Lin family's territory after all. Who knew if there was a teleportation array that was directly connected to the Lin family's headquarters? Once the Lin family sent out a high-level Insight Realm cultivator, Murong Yu wouldn't be a match at all. You kill my son in my city, and you still want to escape? A sinister voice came from not far away. Then, Murong Yu saw a short and wretched middle-aged man with a mustache slowly walking over from afar. Dong! With every step he took, the void under his feet would produce a loud bang, and then it would shatter inch by inch like glass. 4th level of the profound Insight Realm. Murong Yu narrowed his eyes. This person should be the city lord of this city, and also the one with the strongest strength. Wong. As Murong Yu narrowed his eyes, the void of the entire city suddenly trembled. Everyone raised their heads and looked up. Suddenly, they saw that the entire sky above the city was covered by a faint black light shield. Although Lin Hongzhe exploded, there was no flesh and blood splattering out, nor did he turn into a cloud of blood mist. Only a cloud of energy dissipated. This was a power incarnation. A power incarnation had the strength of a level 4 Insight Realm. Then what about his original body? Murong Yu's heart sank. At this moment, a large hand appeared out of thin air, enveloping the void within 1,000 miles of Murong Yu, and directly freezing and confining the void. Murong Yu was shocked. His body swayed, and he was about to retreat. However, that large hand had already grabbed down with a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth, and directly grabbed Murong Yu. Level 5 Insight Realm. Lin Hongzhe was actually a terrifying existence at level 5 Insight Realm, which surpassed Murong Yu by more than 10 levels, and exceeded Murong Yu's peak combat strength by 2 levels. The difference between 1 level was at least 100 times. The difference between 2 levels was at least 10,000 times. 10,000 times. Murong Yu did not even have the chance to escape. After capturing Murong Yu, Lin Hongzhe laughed loudly. At the same time, he took out a simple-looking large cauldron and directly covered Murongyu. Kill her. Lin Hongzhe's eyes flashed with a trace of viciousness as he directly ordered the little lowly to be killed. The little lowly was originally having fun, but when she saw Murongyu suddenly being captured, she could not help but panic. When she saw more people pouncing over, the little lowly immediately fled as if there was oil on the soles of her feet. You big bad guys, just you wait. This beauty will go back and get reinforcements. You better not touch a single hair of this big bad guy, or this beauty will definitely flatten the entire Tiger Claw galaxy. The little lowly fled very quickly, and in an instant, she rushed out of the city barrier formation and fled without a trace. Even those Insight Realm experts could not catch up to her. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.